Discover will help regularly remove your personal info obviously being injured, but not playing in the game, and the Warriors without a rising star either, which is a little bit surprising, something that I had not really thought about. And then Jonathan Kuminga didn't even make the game, which is a little bit odd, but I think it also is somewhat of a testament to how the league views Jonathan Kuminga versus how Jonathan Kuminga is viewed in the Bay Area among Warrior fans. And so the Warriors find themselves at the All-Star break at 29-29 with 24 games to go. They're 22-7 at home. They're 7-22 on the road. They've got 12 home to go, 12 on the road to go, and just unable still to find any momentum. We don't know when Steph Curry's going to return. Since we last spoke, Whitey, the Warriors went through with the Wiseman for Gary Payton II deal, even with the failed physical, even without any additional compensation, which we had obviously discussed that wasn't going to be possible to get any additional compensation. We'll see what happens with the league as far as potential ramifications against the Blazers. But again, that's not going to benefit the Warriors. So now they're in a holding pattern. They're waiting for GP2. They're waiting for Steph. And they're still in that glut of mediocrity, 9th in the West with now 24 games to go, and other teams at the deadline, and potentially via the buyout market, getting better.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was in for Mark Willard, and Dibbs and I were talking about the All-Star announcements of who's going to be in the competitions and everything, and Dibbs said, wow, this might be, when was the last time the Warriors didn't have any representatives? And I thought, well, maybe, that year that you and I were first doing everything, that dreadful season, the pandemic year, I thought maybe that, they didn't have anybody then. But the Rising Stars Challenge at that time. So this is really rare for the Warriors not to have any representation in the All-Star weekend. To your point about the upgrades from other teams, I mean, I'm sure you've seen them. Phoenix is playing pretty well even without Durant. And the Clippers right now, I like the moves they made. And they're playing well if they can keep their two guys on the floor, which is obviously always a big question. I think the Clippers are poised to make a move in the West. Yeah,
and the Warriors still, they find themselves stunted by one bad stretch, seemingly, in every game that does them in, whether it's the 5 to 6 minute drought in the fourth quarter, which has been prevalent the last couple of weeks. It was the end of the third quarter in the game against the Clippers this week as the Warriors trying to build momentum. They're able to beat the Wizards. Can they get to 30 and 28?
The third quarter used to be the Warriors' quarter.
Used to be the Warriors' quarter, but not in L.A. Kawhi Leonard goes off, and these scoring droughts for the Warriors have been problematic in a lot of these games where they haven't been able to build any momentum. But still, as this team heads into the break, the big conversation is about defense, first and foremost, point of attack, on-ball defense, which is leading to a lot of breakdowns in a lot of different areas. I know the Warriors were hopeful that Gary Payton II would come in and just nip that right away, and we don't know when he's going to be available, although the Warriors did go through with that trade that we talked a lot about on last week's show. I don't think I would have done it. I think the Warriors should probably be scrutinized more so based on Peyton's availability. When you accept an injured player, to me, it's less about the Wiseman component to it than the Peyton being healthy component to it. Like if he's healthy, I'm willing to write off, okay, the Wiseman deal didn't work, and you got a player that can fit in your system and be successful. But at the moment in which he's injured and can't play, and has been an injury-prone player the last couple of years, even during his time with the Warriors, it gives me a little bit of pause moving forward that he just may not be able to help a lot.
Well, you're right. If he is able to get on the floor, he directly addresses your biggest need right now, which we've talked about, we all know, on-the-ball defense. But who knows what his status is going to be going forward. So to me, I think one of the reasons it's difficult for the Warriors, like Steve Kerr was on with Damon and Ratto, it's challenging for the Warriors to publicly explain this move because I think a big part of it was the financial consideration, which is understandable if you take an objective view of it, but it's obviously it's a difficult sell PR-wise that, yeah, he was our second pick, but you know what? We're paying so much against the luxury tax, we had to free up some money. I think that's a huge part of it in addition to what you get out of Peyton. But they just ran out of time on James Wiseman, who, as we all know, by the way, had a decent game in his debut with the Pistons. To me, it was it's not fair to judge him too harshly because that was only his 5th game since Christmas. But to me, 11 and 5 and 23 minutes, they lost, and he had some moments where he took some bad shots and looked a little lost. And to me, it's like, that's him. That's James. That's what he is.
It was the exact line that I think Warrior fans would have loved for him to have with regularity on the Warriors, playing that 20 to 24 minutes. All right, help them score it a little bit. He was at -9. I know you don't love the one game, small sample size plus minus numbers, and that's fair.
Well, wasn't that pretty much his rookie year, 11 and 5?
11 and 5 and a whole lot of losing.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of negative minutes on the floor because of his inability to defend. And I think it, in a nutshell, speaks to the bigger issue that the Warriors had at the beginning of this year. And it's maybe the biggest reason they are 29 and 29. And it was the overvaluing of the young players' ability to bridge the gap and help this team now while also developing toward the future. Wiseman was part of it. Kuminga wasn't playing a lot at the beginning of the year. Moses Moody has never really found any traction. And I think the Warriors believed they had legitimate 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9 players on their roster that you could pencil in. And the reality is they didn't have that. And the starters were coasting a little bit, as we've talked about a lot. And they've never really been able to make up for that with any kind of significant run. I think 10 and 4 is their best 14-game stretch. And that was when things got really bad at 3 and 7. And the veterans, I think, gathered and said, we got to make a run to keep this season from getting away completely. Steve Kerr completely stopped playing the young players at that point in time. And then everybody got hurt. And so they got to 13 and 11. And really for the last 2 months, the Warriors have been living in this, well, Curry's been out and Wiggins has been out. Now Curry's back and then Wiggins is still out. And then, when is Clay going to play back-to-backs, which I think is a positive sign.
Absolutely.
From the last week. The Warriors have, I believe, 3 sets of back-to-backs coming up, but a couple of them are right out of the chute here. The young player's inability to bring it back to Wiseman and Wiseman's inability to just not wreck a game with an 11 and 5 -9 is, I think, an extension of why the Warriors are in the position they've been in.
Yeah, I agree. I think you've hit on the absolute key factor here. Everybody, after a season, every team is trying to get better, of course. They're doing things to try to get better. All those things don't work. Some teams actually get worse, but everybody's trying to get better. So if you're the champion, you've got everybody around you like, we're the best team, but okay, everybody else is doing something. So what were the Warriors counting on this year to be better? And it was improvement from the young players because they lost some significant players and they made the decision to get rid of Peyton, who helped, and now he's coming back. He's been hurt. So that's neither here nor there, but they were really counting, to your point, on Wiseman improving and contributing, and Kuminga and Moody. And that's why, going back to the interview on Steiny and Guru when Bob Myers was asked, maybe you were in that day, JD, when he was asked, what do you hope to get realistically from these 3 guys? And he said, if 1.5 pay off, we're happy. At that point, I think the Warriors realized, this ain't going to work out the way we hoped it would. And that's one of the huge reasons they're in this current predicament. It's like, okay, the improvement's not coming from those guys, although Kuminga is showing signs of progress. So where does it come from now? Where do we get it? And if Peyton is hurt, then, you've got your star players are injured. It's really going to be difficult to keep up in the West when you've got Phoenix and the Clippers and even Denver making some moves.
Yeah, you look at Denver, they've been the best team in the West to this point. Phoenix, they obviously add Kevin Durant. I think they're primed to make a move. I like the Clippers' depth with adding Gordon and Plumlee and Bones Highland, and
they might get Westbrook, though, so we'll see. Fasten your seatbelts.
I laughed. I forget who said it, but it was one of the talking heads, one of the pundits had said, hey, Russell Westbrook determines, he where he goes determines who can win the NBA championship. And I thought, well, yes, he does. Whoever gets him will not win the NBA championship.
You know how there's Paul George and Morris on the team they're encouraging the Clippers, sign him. And to me, that's like when one of your players commits a foul and he committed a foul, then he comes over, hey, you got to review that. Sometimes you got to say, nope, we're not reviewing that. In this case, I think the Clippers got to say, no, we're not bringing him in. But apparently there were at least 4 teams that are interested, and the Clippers and Westbrook have started talking about a possible match. So good luck.
He doesn't seem to fit with them based on other players that they've added to this point. Like, why do you go get Bones Highland and you get Eric Gordon? And I know Eric Gordon plays more of a forward role now than he used to, but why would you do that? And then you get Westbrook, and Westbrook has to play at the end of the game. Otherwise, he's going to be potentially the same problem he was with the Lakers. Like, to me, the flexibility and part of what could make the Clippers good and even great here down the stretch of the season is they've got some different options as far as closing lineups. Why would you want to potentially wreck that by throwing Westbrook in there and basically saying, hey, he's playing every night with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard?
I agree with you. I think the argument is, well, we need a point guard. But is he even really a point guard anymore? I know he can be, I guess, but I don't think that's what he is.
No, talented, again, maybe can help you win regular season games. I think that's why the Lakers went and got him going back a couple of years now, and it never worked because you talk about the negatives outweighing the positives. The negatives just outweighed the positives with Westbrook. So, go ahead.
Sorry, JD, but I was going to say, speaking of teams getting better, I mean, I don't know if LeBron's going to play enough for it to matter, but look how much better the Lakers got. Right? Rui Hachimura and Vanderbilt and Beasley, they added some nice pieces.
They did. I think they're maybe too far gone, although they're only 2 games out of the play-in tournament, and Oklahoma City's the final team in, so I probably shouldn't say that. Although OKC at this point has more of a cushion on the Lakers than the Warriors have on them, and the Warriors are the team directly above them right now at 9th in the West. But what is realistic as you look at the Warriors right now? The 4 seed is not right now the Clippers at 33-28. We just saw those 2 teams play. Obviously, no Steph in that one, but I'm looking at the Clippers right now and the Warriors, and it's a 2.5 game difference for 4th. Is 4th still attainable in your mind in the West with Phoenix and the Clippers? I think primed to move up. I think Sac may dip down out of the top 6. I'm not sure. They've got a little bit of a cushion, but it's starting to shake out in my mind as if Denver, Memphis, Phoenix, and the Clippers are going to be the top 4 when it's all said and done.
I agree. I think getting into the top 6 is doable, but it's going to be a stretch perhaps. But top 4, you never know. Lots of things can happen. But to me, that's not very realistic. Dallas, I think Luka and Kyrie at the offensive end, I think there's a really good chance that works because Kyrie knows how to play off the ball. He's proven that. But at the other end, I don't know about them. So if they wobble, maybe they're vulnerable. The Pelicans are a good team when they're healthy, but, Zion is out again. Who knows how much they're going to get out of him, so they could be vulnerable. Minnesota is still kind of a volatile mix right there. So the Warriors have a chance, I think. 6, I think, is about the best they could do realistically, in my opinion. And maybe 5, if, as you say, Sacramento's got a kind of a bumpy ride schedule-wise the rest of the way. But that's if things really start clicking and coming together for the Warriors in a way that, frankly, they haven't to this point all season.
No, they haven't to this point. I was looking at Dallas while we were talking here, and Dallas is 2-3 in 5 games since they made the trade.
And I think Luka missed some of that, and Kyrie missed at least one of those games.
They've only played together in 2 of the 5.
Yeah.
And they lost both games. They lost in Sac, and they lost to Minnesota in the 2 games that they played together. So they're 0-2 in those games. They're 2-1 when they're 2-0 when Kyrie's played, and then Luka played the one game, the final game before the break without Kyrie. They lost that game. So it's kind of as expected, I think, for Dallas at this point. I think they're clearly hoping that they can be top 6. I don't think they have the dramatic push that maybe a Clippers or a Suns ends up with.
I don't think so either. I can see why Dallas did what they did. Maybe we talked about this last week. I think Dallas looked at it and said before their trade, they said, we got a nice team here, but this is not a championship team. If we get Kyrie, maybe we are a team that can compete for a higher seed. So I understand why they took the risk. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to work. And then, of course, the big question for them is, all right, if Kyrie's interested in sticking around, do they hitch their wagon to him going forward? I mean, if you do, good luck. Good luck with that. But I understand the reasoning of getting for the rest of this year probably the best Kyrie you can get because he's still motivated to show everyone that he's worth the big money.
All right, he's Whitey Gleason. I'm John Dickinson. 888-957-9570. It is Warriors this week here on 95.7 The Game with you until 1 o'clock. The Xfinity Mobile text line is open as well. What's a realistic finish to this season for the Warriors? There's 24 games to go. They're still 500. They've dipped again on the road of late after starting to get it back together a little bit. You look at the Warriors going into the break, and they everybody's beating Portland. They can't beat Portland. They fall against the Clippers. They lost the games to Minnesota and Denver before that, so they had started to gain a little bit of traction compared to where they were on the road, but now 4 straight on the road in the loss column leading into the All-Star break. Injuries a part of that, of course, and they haven't been quite as dominant at home as they were earlier on in the year, and it's just any more appropriate than 500. I mean, that's what they've been 14 different times this season, Whitey, and 29 and 29 the latest.
Do you think they're pretty much a lock to at least make the play-in?
I do.
Yeah,
I
it
do.
sure looks that way.
Well, one of the more confounding things about this Warriors team this year, and we were talking about the young players and the inability for them to really be a factor, and the older players, I think, were coasting early. They wanted to win without playing a lot of defense. They couldn't do it. They weren't deep enough. I think, and Steve Kerr's mentioned this a lot, they are deeper now, or the bench has played better, I think is probably a better way of saying it. But when you look at the fact that, I mean, this team's got, I think the 9-11 without Curry is, like, you would take that.
Yes.
And
you'd have to.
But one of the more confounding things is they're 20-18 with Curry. And so that, like, to me, that is like they haven't won enough and the pieces haven't quite fit to the level that they've needed to with Curry healthy and available. That 20-18, you want to be more like 25-13.
Yeah.
And if it's to that level, then we're having a completely different conversation. The Warriors are in that 3-4 spot for sure at this point.
To me, those are the two head-scratching things about the Warriors this year. One is the offense hasn't been great. You look at their offensive rating. What are they, around 12th, I think, last time I checked. And I know Steve Kerr has said, no, our offense is fine. We're scoring points. Offensive rating, they're 13th currently. And we think of them as being a better team offensively. Maybe if they defended better and took care of the ball a little better, that rating would be higher. But I still think it's been an issue with them and the reliance on the three-point shot and the absolute inability to get to the foul line. So I think that's been one thing that's been a surprise. The other thing, to your point, is how often in close games the guys that you think you can count on with the championship DNA have failed to come through. And it's not hard to just go back this year and look at a handful of games where you can recall, they lost one here, they should have won. So that's been really alarming, and that kind of undermines the argument that, well, once they get into the postseason, the veteran players, they did it last year, they can flip that switch. And maybe that's true. I know Richard Jefferson this week said, if the Warriors play Denver, I wouldn't bet on them, but I wouldn't bet against them. But the way the Warriors' biggest names, brightest stars have at times failed to come through down the clutch this year suggests that maybe that switch is not going to be something they can flip once they get into the postseason.
Well, I mean, that is going to be one of the big questions. And you ask me, do you think are they a lock to get in the play-in tournament? What sent me down the path of saying yes was the fact that they have been 9-11. They have been stable without Curry, and nobody knows when Curry's coming back. I know he addressed the media Monday before the Washington game, and it does. The Warriors are down that reevaluation hole.
Right, they're masters of that.
That they go in, and that has become commonplace in the NBA. So and so is going to be reevaluated at this point. Doesn't mean he's coming back, but I think in this instance there has been no firm timeline yet. And so I think the reevaluation point of the first day after the All-Star break is when you might start to glean some semblance of a timeline. But I think the most likely scenario is he's going to come out. They're going to come out on the 23rd, that first day back. Steph Curry update. He's progressing well, and he'll be reevaluated in a week or 10 days or whatever it is. He'll be back at practice or not, or back doing basketball activities, which he hasn't done. That was the big tell to me, was that Steph had said he's not doing any court work yet. And he hoped to get court work in beginning right after the All-Star break. So to me, that is a week to 10 days minimum of lead up And I don't know if you've looked at the schedule coming out of the break, but the Warriors have 6 games in 9 nights with a couple of back-to-backs bookending it. They play the first 2, and then they play the last 2.
So even if Steph's back, it's not like he can play every one of those games, even if he is.
Right. And if you assume that he's not, which I do think it's fair to assume that he's not back, and just the layout of the schedule, I mean, the most realistic, he's probably not playing in any of those 6. And so then you've got 18 games to go. I know Bob Myers was on with Steiny and Guru this week, and he kind of hemmed and hawed around, we hope he comes back, I think at one point he said, and then he followed that up with he will, but there was an undertone of just unsure as to exactly when, and more leading down a path of what seemed like reading the tea leaves later than sooner.
Yeah.
Because I think it's been in a lot of people's minds the thought that, oh, well, he's going to be back shortly after the All-Star break. It seems like we're talking more getting into March 10 or 15 days at a minimum at this point.
So the hopes for the Warriors to turn this season around, to salvage this season, if you will, they hinge on, as they always do to a degree, but they hinge on unknowables. I mean, if Steph can be by playoff time healthy and ready to go, and if Peyton is at a point where he can contribute consistently, then even if they end up in the play-in, it's hard to say, well, that team can't win. Nobody would want to play the Warriors if that's the case. But they're keeping their fingers crossed on these things. And even if those things do happen, it's going to be tough to keep up with the improvements that we've seen from the Clippers and especially the Phoenix Suns. You could question the Suns' depth a little bit, but, I mean, look at Josh Okogie. Can Kevin Durant beat him out for a starting spot? So those two teams are really coming on.
He's been terrific, and the Warriors would love to have a Josh Okogie.
Yeah,
I mean that's the you kind of laugh, but he's
playing great.
He's an excellent defender.
Yeah.
I mean he's healthy and he's an excellent defender, and offense has always been the issue with him, but he is that defensive wing / guard that you covet, really. I mean, in many ways, if the Warriors had a Josh Okogie, they wouldn't need to go get Gary Payton II.
Right.
At that point, or feel that they needed to. So 888-957-9570. What's a realistic finish for the Warriors? Do you think they can still win a title? Could they win a title even out of the play-in tournament? And does this team have the ability to flip the switch again like last year's team? We appreciate everybody who's watching us this morning on YouTube and Twitch as well, although it looks like I'm Whitey Gleason on YouTube and Twitch, and you're at JD John Dickinson, but
gotcha.
You get it. You get it. So, yeah, we appreciate everybody listening. We appreciate everybody watching. Can this team flip a switch? I will get into it coming back.
If we can flip our switch, I think they can flip their switch.
Good, well said. And I just feel like last year's team was so much better. We'll get into some of that coming back. A lot of people flooding the Xfinity mobile text line, Whitey, wanting to discuss the buyout market. So we'll get into the buyout market, as there are a couple of big names that the Warriors might have interest in, but it looks like they're going elsewhere. We'll discuss that. It's all coming back here. Warriors this week. We're off and running on a Saturday here on 95.7 The Game.
Tune in to 95.7 The Game for exclusive and exciting live play-by-play Warriors action brought to you by Toyota. Class-leading MPG and more hybrid models than any other brand. Toyota, let's go places.
Did you know that most people wait
roster spot available still, but is that going to go to Anthony Lamb? Is it going to go to Ty Jerome? The Warriors have to kind of hold out on that. Anybody strike your fancy on the buyout market?
No. I don't see a fit there for the Warriors. I don't want to throw a bunch of names out because I know we're going to talk about all of them here in just a minute. I can imagine who the text line GMs want to sign. I don't see a real good fit there. It's an interesting point you make about no one's been linked to the Warriors. They've been linked in terms of media members going, hey, maybe that guy or that guy, but there's been no actual reporting on the Warriors and anybody having any mutual interest.
Well, and there've been a lot of names, from Boogie Cousins to Russell Westbrook.
No.
That's more of a we don't want Russell Westbrook. And I think we had a couple people saying, hey, go here, go there, because that'll ruin their chances of winning the title and be good for the Warriors. Serge Ibaka.
Yeah, I knew he was going to come up.
Serge Ibaka's names come up a lot.
I don't think he can play anymore.
Kevin Love, who has been linked to Miami. It sounds like the latest reporting this morning is that Miami's the favorite and that is something that could even be official at some point here in the next few hours.
My understanding, and I think last week or the week before I'd said, I don't know if Cleveland's going to let him go because I'd read somewhere that they weren't, and that was wrong, and I said it, so that's on me. But my understanding of Kevin Love's situation, maybe you have more information, he wants to play. He wants to go somewhere where he knows he's going to get minutes. And if I'm the Warriors right now and I look at, the relic that used to be Kevin Love, and I'm thinking, I got JaMychal Green, who's going to probably give me pretty much the same things right now, and I certainly am not in a position where I can guarantee Kevin Love more minutes than he's been getting in Cleveland.
I kind of like the Kevin Love thought with the Warriors, although, again, you're right, he wouldn't be playing any more than maybe 10 to 15 minutes a game.
Well, the last 12 games, he didn't play at all.
And I like it. I do like, in a vacuum, I like his skill set for the Warriors, his passing ability,
no
his
question,
shooting ability.
Mm-hmm.
He's not great defensively. Obviously, you'd have to play five at this point. He's just a high basketball IQ guy. So I like that in theory, but I just don't think, to your point and what had been reported about his desires to play, the Warriors couldn't promise him a significant amount of minutes. And so I think that's where they find themselves, in addition to already having that roster slot filled with JaMychal Green, that keeps Kevin Love out of the equation.
He's also been struggling with his shot a little bit. You know what he's shooting this year? And I think there may be an injury. Yeah. He's at 38.9%. And, it's like, well, he's Kevin Love, but
that's
he has
not
been
3-point shooting. That's overall shooting.
3 points at 35. So, Kevin Love, he's not shooting well. As you say, doesn't defend well. It's the same thing with some of these buyout guys. It's like, I don't think he's that guy anymore. It reminds me of last year. Remember, Philly went out and they got, because Doc's thinking, DeAndre Jordan. He was so good for me. And we already knew, that guy can't play anymore. And Philly got him, and he's not that guy anymore.
The 5-1-0 Warriors have had very little success in the buyout market. Players pick other teams. I think Kevin Love is somebody who might come because of his relationship with Clay. The Dubs need to add a big man for depth. I think part of it hasn't been a failure. I think part of it is the buyout market is a little bit overrated. And I heard Steve Kerr in one of his press conferences, I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, one of these last two games, he said, buyout market, everybody loves talking about it, but there isn't really a lot of players that can truly be impactful. I think it's been more by design that the Warriors, because they favor continuity in their system and players that have been around, I just don't think they believe there are too many players that can come right in from another squad and really that are even worth their time.
Don't you think the buyout market is really best suited for a team that's very close and maybe has one specific area that they want to tweak? And then it's like sometimes you get a guy, it's like, hey, this guy, he's motivated to come in and help a good team win.
I think what you just said is Gary Payton II. The Warriors got their buyout player. They're buying him from Portland as an injured player, and they're going to pay him $8 million a year the next 2 years, plus whatever's remaining this year, and they're going to pray he can play.
He's going to be fine. You'll see. He'll be fine.
Well, exactly.
It'll be great.
The folks on YouTube and Twitch saw you with your fingers crossed as you said that.
I really hope he is.
There's one name, new one, Carmelo Anthony. A lot.
Carmelo Anthony.
Here's why fans love the buyout
and
market.
DeMarcus Cousins.
Fans love the
problem solved.
Fans love the buyout market because it's big names at cheap prices.
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot of the times the buyout market, and Steve Kerr didn't say this, but I'm going to take it a step farther than he did. A lot of times these dudes are washed.
Exactly.
A lot of times the guys on the buyout market are washed.
It reminds me,
and that's
JD,
a reason why they haven't been playing with the team that they run or the team that just acquired them via trade as filler.
I remember my dad used to be a sports writer in Vallejo for the Vallejo Times-Herald, and he would come home and for dinner, and he would tell me about the NFL teams. Oh, this guy got released, that guy got released early, before the season started. And sometimes it was big names, and I'd wonder, how can teams let those guys
go? He's a good player.
Yeah, exactly. But you know how it is in football. Once you lose it, that's it. You're done. And it's a similar thing going on now with some of these names. I agree with you. So whoever it is, it's like a lot of times he's unfortunately not that guy anymore. So he's not going to be able to help you in the way that you would wish. Kevin Love is very interesting to me. I've always liked watching him play, and I think he's a good fit in a lot of ways. It just doesn't sound like he really has much interest in coming here. Whether the Warriors have interest in him, I don't know.
There's one name that I did leave out that we'll get to coming up here. I jotted it down. I drew a circle around it.
Oh.
Although I think this player would be redundant.
Huh.
Based on their most
When are you going to tell us?
Acquisition. We're going to tell you in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
Maybe 5 minutes. We'll get a couple of calls here. I don't want to keep the people waiting. 888-957-9570. Let's get it going with Will in Oakland up first here on Warriors This Week. What's going on, Will?
Hey, Will.
What's happening? To start it off, you guys have literally the greatest show of all time. So
wow,
that was a compliment.
Appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah.
What do you guys think about them trying to make a move for Peyton?
Okay, thanks, Will. Appreciate it. DeAndre Ayton? Next year?
So.
I was going to hire Will as my agent, and then he said, go.
But he thinks big. Maybe he's your guy because he's,
You can't get DeAndre Ayton now.
Ideas. No, I don't think so.
No.
He's actually been playing really well. He's a really important part of them. The whole thing for them is if Paul stays healthy, right? And KD, too. To
me, it's KD.
Yeah.
I mean, it's KD and Booker, and you make that move. I mean, you make that move because it's KD, and you feel like you're going all in. But the other part that I liked about Phoenix doing that deal is I don't think they could run it back with the team that team now has too many playoff demons with Ayton and Bridges and Johnson and CP and Booker even included in that. To me, that mix, and I think they were on the path toward getting it going anyway. Like they were making a push after
That's an interesting point.
They had played a month to 6 weeks without Booker or Chris Paul, and had gone from 8 or 10 games over 500 down to about 300. I mean, they were awful. They were like 2-15.
I still don't know what happened to them last year, and I know the company line is everybody got COVID, but that was disastrous what happened to them against Dallas.
It was, and I think that, to me, that's now 2 years in a row. You got the 2-0 lead in the finals. You lose to the Bucks. So to me, you weren't winning you could have made a run. You weren't winning a title with that core group. That was done. So to pick now is the time that you go all in. I think the timing of it is really perfect. It also coincides with the fact that Chris Paul is clearly on a decline.
Yeah.
And so you don't want him to be your second best player.
Right.
You want him to be your third or your fourth best player, depending upon Ayton, who might be your third on certain nights. And obviously Booker and Durant are some combination of your 1 and the 2. So you become a Booker Durant based team with Chris Paul on the fringe, and you add Terrence Ross and some other things. They still have some of the other older players. They have some good players. Damian Lee's helped them. They have some good players. Torrey Craig helps them. Like they've got some.
He's a pretty good defender.
Some better role players, I think, than they get credit for.
Yeah, who's hurt now.
So I like the timing of the move for Phoenix to try and all right, you're going all in on Durant. Well, you weren't going to win it with what you had anyway, so you might as well take the shot on Durant, and he's under contract. And if he could stay healthy, then you've got Booker and Durant and everybody else. I think I got to see Durant actually be healthy, and they're a team looking significantly in the buyout market. But I think Phoenix, I don't want to quite call them the favorite yet because I think it's a little bit disrespectful to Denver. but I'd put them ahead of everybody else other than Denver at this point, including Memphis and the Clippers and anybody else.
Yeah, I have to wait and see how they gel before I put them ahead of the Clippers. But I understand your point. And as far as Will goes, thank you very much for the kind words. Appreciate that. And because you were so nice, I don't want to crush your Ayton dreams.
I think he was running material. Greatest show ever.
Yeah,
I'm about to hire him.
Right.
I may or may not be looking for an agent. I'm about to hire him. And then
hey, listen to this. Hey, you guys are the greatest show ever. I think the word should get Ayton. Click.
Night. Scott in Berkeley. Scott in Berkeley's not running any material. We know that. What's going on, Scott?
Well, thanks for the acknowledgement that at least I've come up with some relatively good takes. I get, I was thinking about it when they said that Cleveland was buying out Love, and I said, defensively he's going to be abysmal. But the thing about Kevin is that he may be the last great under the rim rebounder. He's like his godfather, Wes Unseld. And the other thing I keep thinking of is that if the Warriors really wanted to push it, him getting a rebound and snapping an outlet would be, I think, good. And again, the thing is that the Warriors' legacy to me has been a team that has operated by unconventional means insofar as how they got to being a title contender, which is why the Wiseman pick really didn't work out, because it was a conventional pick. There's a lot to wonder about with Love, obviously because of the age. And I just saw a report where I think they said he was going to talk to Philadelphia first, and I was kind of interested in that because I heard that part of the agreement with the buyout was that he wasn't going to stay in the Eastern Conference. So there's, maybe there's something there, and I'm kind of like leaning toward it and thinking maybe that works for some reason. Because again, Wiseman was never going to be able to flare out to the baseline, catch a pass, and throw it between his legs back to Steph, who's coming on the curl around for the three, the way that Bogut or Zaza used to be able to.
Thanks for the call, Scott. I think Kevin Love does make sense from a basketball standpoint. Again, the Warriors are not going to ask him to play a lot of minutes. At least they wouldn't.
And you don't have to trade Clay to get him this time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going way in the Wayback Machine. Some of the great moves that were not made along this Warriors run that have really benefited them. Look, it looks like he's going to Philly or Miami. It was reported that he's going to meet with Philadelphia as well, although Miami appears to be the favorite at this point. I don't think, and there's been nothing to even out remotely indicate that the Warriors would have any interest other than, hey, he's a from an offensive standpoint a player that I do think would fit their system.
Mm-hmm.
And help their basketball IQ. And he is a terrific rebounder, and the rebounding and the outlet pass, and he's a skilled player.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I know the last couple of years there's been talk in the offseason about maybe Kevin Love, and all the points you just laid out have always made that a really attractive option. At this point of his career, right now, he's 34 and he's fallen off a little bit this year. I don't think he's the fit that he used to be just because of the decline in his skills. And also the big thing is the minutes he's going to want. I don't think the Warriors are in position to give him the opportunity to play that he's looking for right now.
And where truly, where truly would the fit be in terms of the roster with, as you mentioned, JaMychal Green playing the way that he's playing, and his...
He'd almost be a JaMychal Green insurance policy, and he probably has no interest in being that, in a way.
Exactly.
I'd love to see it. I just don't think it's going to happen.
No question. 888-957-9570. All right, let's get to the name of that has popped up a lot here via the Xfinity mobile text line as far as buyout candidates.
Okay.
What about Patrick Beverley? Patrick Beverley, who I deem Patrick Beverley to be redundant because you just went and traded for Gary Payton II. The 559 immediately disagreeing vehemently. 559 Xfinity mobile text line. Pat Bev is not redundant. GP2 may not get back to where he was. Pat Bev is a great insurance policy. He tweeted last night something or other. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
He liked the idea. He tweeted last night he liked the idea.
To me,
Pat Bev for defense until Peyton gets back.
I don't.
To me, it's if you didn't have Gary, I'd be open to it.
I don't think he's worth the trouble anymore. He's wired a little differently, and he's very intense. And I mean, why didn't it work out with the Lakers? He didn't give them what they wanted from him.
I don't think they were good enough in other areas to carry him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, carry him what? Where?
His deficiencies.
Yeah, and he is not a great shooter anymore. Halfway decent 3-point shooter, and I don't think he's the defensive player he was. And there's a lot of baggage there that when he was playing well, he was a big part, I think, of Minnesota's success last year because he brought some of that dog mentality, and the Warriors certainly could use that. But now I think he's a dog who's more bark than bite. So I'm not surprised that he's still available.
Yeah, that's been coming up. His name's been up a lot. 415 in response to Kevin Love. We already have a geriatric forward in Iguodala. Different positions there.
Yeah.
But is Iguodala going to
Bev got traded to Orlando, right? And they're the ones that parted company with him.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. He's been on a lot of teams the last couple of years.
No doubt. I think that it's interesting. If the Warriors had stood pat at the deadline, and let's say Wiseman was still on the team, and we knew Wiseman wasn't going to play, whether he was still on the team or not, and you didn't go get anybody to address the defense, I do think he would be a fit. Although, again, Peyton guards a few more positions and just fits into the Warriors' offense better. I mean, they basically can throw Peyton on anybody 1 through 4 defensively, but then he can play the dunker spot offensively, or they can put him in the corner to shoot threes and a shot that he's improved over the course of his career that teams are probably going to give him. So he is, and I know the Warriors have laid this out, a unique fit in a way that if he's healthy can help the Warriors more than probably any other team. That was the sense I got from watching him a little bit in Portland. It's kind of like what we just said about Pat Bev.
Yeah.
They weren't good enough in other areas to even carry him when he was able to play in the last 10, 15 games.
Yeah. Pat Bev, real quick, his shooting has really fallen off the last couple of years, and these numbers can be a little misleading because they're team numbers, not individual numbers. But, his calling card is defense, of course, and they were worse with him on the floor defensively. He kind of hurt
surprise me.
Yeah, they were like 112 off. His offensive rating 112, defensive rating 115. So I see what you're saying. I mean, if you didn't have Peyton and you're looking, how in the world can we upgrade our defense? Because I think we all agree that's the biggest area of concern for the Warriors. So I don't think he's it. And then Peyton, here's the thing about Peyton, JD, because I thought of him a lot this year before we had any idea the Warriors going to trade for him. So they let him go, and he was so great last year. They could have kept him to this point. And even if he had been healthy, I don't think there's any way he would have played as well as he did last year, because he played out of his mind last year, right? At both ends. He was phenomenal last year. So I'm still excited about him coming back if he can play. But the biggest thing, as I say, is the fact that if he's healthy and he can play, he improves you defensively. And that's the real sore spot for the Warriors.
650 on the Xfinity mobile text line. Pat Bev, not redundant. The Warriors stink at closing games this season. Would Patrick Beverley really be on the floor at the end of games? I mean, would he?
Not if I was
who?
Yeah.
I mean, Steph and Clay and Wiggins and Draymond are going to be out there for sure. And so it's like we've discussed a lot. Who's that fifth player going to be? It might be Looney, might be Poole, might be Iguodala if he was ever healthy, might be DiVincenzo, I think, has put his name in the hat. And somebody that can defend and be a high IQ ball mover. I just don't. He wouldn't be finishing games.
No, I don't think so. Again, we've been saying this about the buyout market players. I think he's another example of a guy he's not that guy anymore. I mean, I think there's a reason why. We'll see what happens. Maybe he ends up signing with somebody really good. But everybody can use on the ball defense, and there are a lot of good teams right now looking to sign somebody to help make the push. And he's still out there, so that tells me something. We'll have to wait and see where that goes, but he's been now the last couple of years, it was the Clippers, and it was in Minnesota, and the Lakers, and Orlando, and they don't want him. Now maybe he's going to be on another team. I think that tells us all we need to know about his career arc.
I do think it's funny that there are a certain portion of Warrior fans that would be willing, given Beverley's antics,
right,
to be able to be willing to take him on.
Well, once Richard Sherman helped the 49ers, I think all that stuff, a lot of that stuff you got to throw out the window, right?
I would think a lot of Warrior fans would be like, he's trash, basura.
Yeah,
get him out of here. Don't want any of that negative energy that can be attached to.
Well, putting that aside, but kind of related to that, from the Warriors' culture standpoint, do you see that potentially would they be okay as long as he guarded people, or he's a different kind of cat?
Yeah, if he could defend, I think he'd be fine. If he could actually defend at a certain level to help them, his personality wouldn't be a problem. In fact, I think it actually could help you. Having a pest.
Yeah.
I'm sort of with the texters on that.
All right.
On that part of it. Like, I wouldn't worry about the antics or him taking the video camera out to the official. I thought that was great, by the way. I thought that was great. Everybody hated that like it was the most egregious
He was
thing.
Right. Yeah, that was prettle clever.
There was remember when Randy Moss did the fake moon?
That was a disgusting act.
Yeah, at Lambeau. And Joe Buck thought it was like the most horrific thing he'd ever seen in his life. I felt like there was a similar reaction to GP going up to the official with the camera that said, "You guys blew the call." I thought that was awesome.
I'm not the biggest Pat Bev fan in the world, but I'm with you on that. I thought that's pretty clever. And it's like, there you go. You missed it. Yeah.
That's just, I don't know. I thought it was great. And it just, apparently I was the only one that thought that. Oh, how could you do that?
Don't you think right now, if Peyton's healthy, he's a better offensive player than Patrick Beverley?
Say that again?
If he's healthy, Peyton is a better offensive player.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you bring in Patrick Beverley,
in a way that helps the Warriors. I think Beverley over his career has been able to knock down some threes.
Yes. I'm talking about where he is now. Yeah, you're right. So my point is that let's you put him on the floor with Looney and Draymond and Patrick Beverley. It's like, where's the offense coming from? So that's an issue too with him right now.
888-957-9570. Let's go to Austin and San Jose next here on 95.7 The Game. What's going on, Austin?
What's going on, guys?
Hey.
Always great to talk to you guys. Listen, I'm a little surprised that you guys are letting the trade slide. I mean, I know it's great to talk about GP2. We all love GP2, but let's be honest. The trade, the Wiseman thing, is a scratch. It's a head scratcher. I mean, we basically traded Wiseman. Not that I wanted Wiseman to stay, but we traded Wiseman for a guy that can't play. And as we talk about the buyout market, I don't think we need to go get any of these. These guys have been around forever, like Beverley. I mean, Beverley would be great, but let's go get a younger guy that can just rebound and put the ball back in the hole. We don't need to go get any of these Kevin Love. No, we don't need Kevin Love. But I think the Clippers just released a young center that might be available. I mean, go get a guy like that, a little bit younger and can rebound and put it back in the hole. That's my input, but I'm surprised you guys haven't said more about Bob Myers and really what I deem as a basic, really screw up on the trade with Wiseman. We didn't get anything. We let Sadiq Bey go, which Sadiq Bey would have been a nice fit. I mean, I'd like to hear you guys talk more about that. Thanks.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it last week on the show, and I'm on record. I would not have done the deal. I've said that.
And I would have. Yes.
I went in pretty hard on that last week and even a little bit this week.
It's still relevant,
some of the post-game shows.
Sure.
Once Gary Payton, I understand why the Warriors did the deal. I understand that they were done with Wiseman. I understand the financial component of that. And I also understand, if healthy, Gary Payton II does bring them back somebody that would plug right into their rotation as the 8th or the 9th, depending upon where you view Kuminga. I think if healthy, he's probably 8. Kuminga's probably 9. I think that's a low-key reason you make the deal, I think, too, is it takes a little bit less off of Kuminga in the playoffs having to play a lot because you would have Peyton who can play some of those minutes. So, but that all being said, at the point in which he was a failed physical player, I would have vetoed the deal. And to me, I've said not only that, but the fact that the Warriors really do need to be scrutinized closely for Peyton's ability to play. If Peyton can't play at any point between now and the end of the year, that is a problem. And that the trade should be graded accordingly. Like the final verdict on this trade is not in
right
at this point. And
It actually won't be for years, most likely.
It won't be for years, but I'm not giving the Warriors a pass on that. And to me, it's less about the Wiseman part and what Wiseman becomes, because I think Wiseman was never going to become that player here. Maybe they waited 3-4 years, which they didn't have the time to wait. To me, it's more about now, is Peyton actually useful and able to play? And if he's not, then it's a horrific trade, because Peyton's not, he's making money the next 2 years. He's under contract for 2 more. I mean, you could have a guy that can't play for the next 2 years because of different injury here and there.
And I'm assuming that they have a reason to expect he'll be healthy. I don't know that.
Clearly.
But yeah, so I'm assuming that. I may be in the minority, Austin. I said last week I would have made the trade. I understand why the Warriors did it. I think it's part of the reason it's hard to understand some of it is because I think it had to do with things that we don't like to think about when it comes to trades. Like, well, we traded away this guy who was number 2 pick and got this guy who's hurt. But I think the financial component, as JD mentioned, I know JD understands it. Everybody understands it. I think that was huge. It's like this guy, we couldn't play him. The coaches couldn't play him, and we have to pay him all this money next year, which really hurts us against the cap. So it'd be great if we were in a situation where we could wait at least 1 more year to see if he got it, but our coaches don't think he's a good fit. Our coaches don't want to say this, but they don't think he can play, and we have to pay him all this money, $12.1 million times a luxury tax. We send him out. That helps us financially next year. We get a guy that everyone likes, that fits our culture, that really helps us defensively. So I think it was a good move. We'll see if it works out, but I do understand it. It is a trade, as I said last week, that I would have made. Now, if Peyton never plays, as we said last week, that changes the equation a little bit, but I'm assuming the Warriors have reason to believe that he is going to be able to play at some point.
All right, he's Whitey Gleason. I'm John Dickinson. 888-957-9570. We got 1 hour down. We got 2 hours to come. Moses Brown, by the way, was the big that Austin was talking about that the Clippers had just waived.
All right. Thank you, Austin.
Again,
thank you, JD.
But if a if Wiseman's not playing, I don't see the Warriors plugging in a young 7-footer.
Right.
Nothing against Moses Brown. I've actually kind of liked watching him play a little bit when he's gotten opportunities. All right, more of Warriors this week. Straight ahead here at 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
different things here this morning. What's a realistic finish for the Warriors over the final 24 games? Do you think they can still flip a switch in the playoffs? Can you even get into the playoffs at this point? You don't want to sound too arrogant, although I think Whitey and I both confident that the Warriors at least will be in the play-in portion of the playoff tournament. And then getting into the GP2 Wiseman trade as well as the buyout market here on All-Star Saturday.
I understand the frustration. I was at a Super Bowl party and a Warrior fan was, complaining, as a lot of Warrior fans are, looking at look at the Lakers got Rui Hachimura and they got all, and they
Vanderbilt.
got Vanderbilt.
Love to have Vanderbilt.
And Beasley. And what do the Warriors get? They give up the number 2 pick and they get a guy who's hurt. So I understand all that. I know someone on the text line mentioned this, JD, that the Warriors had a chance. Looks like they had a legitimate chance to land a bigger fish, and they just decided ultimately that the price was too high, that Toronto's asking price was too high for OG and Anunoby. The complexion of everything would be a lot different right now if they decided to make that move.
That's a deal that I would have looked really hard at.
Pardon me, but just to be clear here, according to reports, we're talking about Jonathan Kuminga, picks, and additional players for OG and Anunoby.
Yeah, I would have looked at it. And I don't know, if it had been Kuminga, Moody, and 2 first-round picks, and I know the Warriors' first-round picks are tied up, I would have done it. Because that would have allowed you the defense that you need at this point, and a younger player and somebody that would be a finisher. Like, he would be the 5th finisher at that point. It would be Steph and Clay. It would be Wiggins and Anunoby and Draymond.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would be your 5 in your closing lineup, and you'd be able to be versatile and switch everything. And all of that. And I get it. 5-1-0, Kuminga's upside's way too good. Yeah, we'll see about that. And that's why the Warriors, I think, in part, didn't do the deal. But
OG Anunoby's only 25.
Right. And he's already a capable starter in the NBA. And we'll see. We'll see what Kuminga has become. And the Warriors hung on to Wiseman for a couple of years because they believed in the upside in the potential development. And you can see it with Kuminga. Like, you can see the legitimate upside that Kuminga has, but is it going to take him 2 more years to be on Anunoby? And at that point, we'll see. What do you have left as far as Steph, Clay, and Draymond? But to me, that would have been the kind of move that puts you on par with, you have multiple defenders that can go at the Durants, the guys that Milwaukee and Boston have, the ability to compete with everybody that Denver has except for Jokic. Like that to me would have been, you got action in the playoffs if you get OG Anunoby.
I'd love to see it, but I don't think Kuminga will ever be as good of a 3-point shooter as Anunoby's been. Maybe he will be. OG Anunoby for his career is 37%. Where would you? And I like the idea too. So I'm not coming down your road, but as long as we're talking about it.
Well, let's be honest. There's 2 things that people are coming down my road about. Yeah. It's like I don't love the GP2 trade, although if he's healthy and contributes this year, then that's fine. But to me, he has to do that for it to be like, you can't assume that he will.
Right.
Like, Peyton has to actually produce.
It's possible. No one knows that. Nobody knows that.
If he helps them win playoff games this year, then it works out. If he is healthy, relatively speaking, over the next couple of years, then that's fine. You also have to factor in down the line, what has Wiseman become? But I also think you have to accept the fact that Wiseman wasn't going to become, whatever Wiseman becomes, I think, and this is a tough pill to swallow, but you have to accept the fact that he was never going to become that here, even if he does go on to become it elsewhere, and that can be frustrating. But the name value of a GP2, Whitey, in the Bay, like that, to me, the Warrior fan base has a soft spot for GP2, which is why I think this deal to this point has been a little bit overrated by the fans than it probably should be. And I think it's similar with Kuminga. I think Kuminga has, tantalize the athleticism, the ability, future Giannis or Kawhi, like all those things that are probably unrealistic. I know, and you rolled your eyes as I said it.
Because I actually have heard some of that.
It's unrealistic, but there are people that think he's going to be a future superstar. And so I think his name value among the Warrior fan base carries a little bit more weight than it probably should at this point.
I think
so. I think that's where people that are saying, JD, you're crazy, don't get Anunoby, are the same people in some ways that are saying, JD, you're crazy if you don't like the GP2 trade right now.
I think you hit the nail on the head again in terms of a reason why the Warriors wanted to make this trade that they would never discuss. It helps to soften the blow of trading away your number 2 pick. We have the number 2 pick, and it didn't work out. Oh, boy. But look who we're bringing back. I don't think that's the ultimately the reason why you make the deal, but I think it's something when they looked at, they're like, yeah, it makes it easier to sell this to our fan base. What I was going to ask you, though, is about Anunoby. And again, I'm not arguing with you that you're wrong about you would have made the deal or looked more closely into it. I'm just wondering, where would you have played him? He's played small forward. Would you limit Wiggins' minutes, or he's on the floor with Wiggins? And I know, they didn't do it. So, yeah.
They could play together.
Mm-hmm.
To me, if
he's a really good player, and looks like they could have had him.
He's a really good player. To me, he would have been a complementary player to Steph and Clay and Wiggins and Draymond. He's somebody you could put out there and help mask some of Jordan Poole's defensive deficiencies, even with a bench group. To me, he is everything you want in today's NBA. The one thing I will say, appreciate the texter. A couple of pointed out he gets hurt too. He has
he does.
Injury prone. He wasn't playing at the end of the lead up to the All-Star break.
Yeah, you look at his games played the last few seasons. Not great. To me, it would have hinged on, as it may have, what draft picks are we talking about? Kuminga and Moody think about that. Draft picks, which ones, how many? That's, to me, what it would have come down to. I also would have strongly considered it, but according to all reports, the Warriors did strongly consider it before deciding, no, that's just a little rich for our blood.
888-957-9570. Let's go to Will in Santa Cruz next here on Warriors This Week. What's going on, Will?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey.
What's going on, man?
My biggest thing for this offseason, pardon?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
You guys there?
Yep, we got you.
My biggest thing is they had all of last season and this entire offseason to take into apart Mike Brown's absence. And you're telling me with all the money they spend, the best they can get is a 15th overall defense? Don't get me wrong, I ain't calling for the guy's head, but there's times last year, our zone defense just shut people down. They wouldn't know what to do. This year, they walk right through it. What's going on?
Yeah, I think some of it is effort. I think some of it is the fact that they don't have as many good defensive players on the roster.
On the ball stuff,
yeah. And they did get really creative last year, and with Mike Brown as the defensive coordinator, they really got, I thought, more opponent specific in their defensive game plans with the players that they had last year than I'd ever seen them in the Steve Kerr era. Like, they really, and I think part of that was the willingness to go all in the regular season to win as many games as possible. I know Coach Kerr has talked about this a lot, the fact that they had something to prove last year as a franchise after missing the playoffs 2 straight years that I just don't think, frankly, had been there. It is players and scheme, because you look at Mike Brown, I think the Kings are 24th or 25th in defense. I know that they are having a great year.
He has said we cannot guard anybody
defensively.
Yeah.
They are worse than the Warriors defensively. Honestly, I was looking, I think they're 24th right now in defense.
It's pretty bad.
They're worse than that. You watch them, they could be 31st out of 30 teams. On some, but like every game, and I'm not. They're having a great year. They're 7 over 500. He's done a great job. Mike Brown should be the coach of the freaking year. But their offense is turbocharged. Like, their offense is, they have the number 1 offense, and they have like the 24th or the 25th ranked defense.
Right.
It's been offense why they're having the year that they've had, and in particular, I was looking at, not to go down the weeds here, but I was looking at some of their numbers. Talking about Sacramento's numbers, they have a 130 offensive rating in the clutch. They have their offensive rating in clutch situations.
You know why?
Is 10 points better than the next team. Like, they have been ridiculous, and they are, I think, the MLB team that goes 18-2 in 1-run games, and you're like, oh, like, how are they doing it? And it just like, is that sustainable? Well, for this year, maybe it is, because it's a special year.
Yeah,
but there's a little something in the. They're having a special year.
Legitimately,
they
yeah,
are having
okay.
a special year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one reason they're doing that, Fox, is he's amazing down that stretch of games where everyone knows that he's coming at you, but he's so fast that he gets to his spot. I think this has to do with the Warriors, too, as you look at the West going forward. The Warriors last year I don't know if you'd agree, JD. I think you would. Early in the year, the Warriors kind of caught some teams by surprise. They got off that great start. They had missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. They came out of the gates last year, boom, and they caught some teams by surprise. I think Sacramento has done that to a degree, and I think their schedule gets tougher. It's going to be tough sledding for them in a lot of ways the rest of the season for Sacramento, and that obviously could impact the Warriors as well. So as far as the point about the Warriors in their zone not getting too wonky, but Will said last year the zone was really effective. Last year the Warriors, remember Steve Kerr was asked, what's the most surprising thing about this team to you last year? And he said, our defensive rebounding. And I think the Warriors, they were very high. They might have finished second. When you play zone, as you know, JD, anybody who plays basketball, it's hard to rebound defensively, harder in a zone because you're in a space rather than on an individual player. This year, the Warriors' defensive rebounding is not great. They're middle of the pack, so that makes it harder to play more zone. Also, they don't have the guys. I don't think they've been as effective stopping the ball at the point of attack. When you're in a zone, it's kind of passive, but to compensate for that, because the guy's standing there, you got to put pressure on the basketball. And with their current personnel, I think they're having a harder time doing that.
Without a doubt. 888-957-9570. Ryan in San Francisco next here on Warriors This Week. What's going on, Ryan?
Yo. What's good? How you guys doing today?
Good.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
What's up, Ryan?
Awesome. Yo, so I understand that GP2 isn't playing right now, but honestly, in reality, if we had the money to pay him in the off season, I would have rather had paid him then. And because I feel like when he went to Portland, I feel like those doctors weren't actually doing what they need to do to make sure this dude was efficient and not injured. He's going to be back. And, you got to realize, like, the effort that he put in to make sure that we actually got, as fans, a championship last year, he owes some love. He's owed some love from the Golden State Warriors tribe. You know what I mean? And I wish Wiseman would have had the opportunity to grow into a player that he's going to be here. It just didn't happen that way. But, I would like to see some other players come to help us. Like I saw Love is going to the Heat, which is kind of like, all right, cool. We need somebody, but it is what it is, man. Hope y'all have a good day.
Yeah, appreciate it. No, GP2 does deserve all the love for helping that team win a championship last year. That's without a doubt. And he is a fan favorite. But he's got to be able to play for the deal to be worth it at the end of the day. I mean, at a minimum, regardless of what you think of Wiseman. And I guess I'm more in the camp of I'll believe it when I see it as far as Peyton's ability to play. And, yeah, the Portland doctors, they have been admonished, and the way the Blazers potentially failed to disclose components of the injury and the treatment plan to the Warriors, like that's all fair game, but you don't get to when you accept a player with a failed physical, when you accept an injured player with a failed physical, if it doesn't work out, you don't get to blame Portland anymore. Like you had the ability to not do the deal. So I'm holding the Warriors accountable for the result in this instance. And so if he's able to play, I get it. If he's not, and I know this is going to be unpopular because people don't want to do this around here, but if Gary Payton II can't play or is injury prone the next couple of years, that's on the Warriors, and the Warriors should be scrutinized for that, not anybody else.
Ryan touched on a really interesting point about how the Warriors could have kept Peyton. They decided to let him go. And to me, that speaks to the fact that they had a plan that essentially just didn't work. And the plan was, we love GP2, but you know what? We got to let him go because he can make so much money. We don't want to spend that money. And we've got some of our younger guys are going to help fill that void.
Luxury tax is a big part of it.
Yeah. And don't you think, JD, spoke to the plan? Moody will give us some of that. Not that he's the same player. Kuminga and Wiseman. So we're going to rely again on the younger players to step up this year and assume larger roles. And when that hasn't happened, then all of a sudden you're like, wow, we're paying Wiseman. We've got to pay him all this money. He can't get on the floor. We're better off bringing back GP2.
It made sense to not bring GP2 back. He got a 3-year, $28 million contract like that. That when you're talking about was $75-80 million, I think it was, in actual money. Like that made sense. And I know at that point Warrior fans were riding high off of the title and everything being gravy and all of that. So I get I get as a fan, hey, you want to keep that, but the financial decision made sense because of him as an injury-prone player even then. Like, to me, that everything about Gary Payton II read as the Warriors absolutely got the most out of him that maybe any team will get out of him in his career for that particular stick. How often do we see players that will have a year or two, maybe, like Peyton did, get paid? They're injury-prone players. Their bodies just break down, and they're out of the league.
I was telling somebody,
that's on the table here.
He reminds me, and I hope I'm wrong here, because I'd love to see him play and continue to be effective. Pitchers in baseball, JD, I'm sure you remember this. There were times when a guy would throw like 323 innings and won like 25 games, and then sometimes like he was done. It's like, that's it. Yeah. And Peyton, hopefully he's not one of those guys based on what he did last year. So this is interesting to me. See what you think of this. I think maybe the Warriors learned a lot from what happened with the Giants and Correa. Remember when everything fell apart with Carlos Correa? Carlos Correa's agent, Scott Boras, got out in front of that right away. And the first reports were how the Giants screwed up. And Guru and I talked to Bob Myers right when that thing was breaking. So, the Warriors were keenly aware of all that. The Warriors got out in front of that right away. That doesn't mean they were right to make the trade or wrong, but all the reports about Portland's doctors and the Toradol shots, which some of it wasn't accurate. Yeah. I think the Warriors learned from what happened to the Giants and said, we're not going to let that blow up in our faces like that did for them.
And to me, the Warriors, in some sense, and you're right, from a PR standpoint, I mean, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to, hey, we're getting this guy back that everybody loves, and in many ways, the fan base views it as a wrong that's been righted in getting him back. But if it doesn't work out, that's Portland's fault. Like, that's Portland's fault. Portland sold us damaged goods. Like, But no, you cannot do the deal. Like, the recourse is not they have to give you more picks after the trade deadline goes by.
Don't you think
the recourse is you don't do the deal? And for people saying, you can only criticize the deal if you could have got another player. Let me tell you something. Again, going to be unpopular. I love GP2. He helped the Warriors. He can help them again. But an unpopular thing is you could have traded Wiseman for an 8th or a 9th man. That's the truth. You could trade
I'm not
Wiseman
sure what
for
else
an
you could have gotten for him.
Well, no, and that's fair. I don't even disagree with that. But you could trade Wiseman for an 8th or a 9th man in July. Like, if you're taking back a player that can't play at any point. And again, I know they believe he will be able to come back and play. They believe that they'll get more out of him than another team can. That's fine. If it works out, then I'll tip my cap to him. It worked out. Like, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I'm skeptical that he's just going to be a healthy player for the most part the next 2.5 years.
That would be the one thing I would say to you. I understand your argument completely, but I would say my guess, and it's a guess, I think the Warriors have to have a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to get on the floor for them and play. Otherwise, yeah, you're right. But for them to have made this move and assume the risk, I think their doctors have to be extremely confident. You never know if Gary Payton II is going to play anywhere like he did last year, but I got to believe that they firmly believe he will be able to get back on the floor for him this year.
Let's go to Mitch in New Jersey.
Hey.
Up next here. What's going on, Mitch?
Mitch.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for taking my call. Just want to say Kevin Love is out there. You think the Warriors or something West, where do you think he's going? I think he's a borderline Hall of Fame. I think he still has a few years left in him.
Thanks, Mitch. It looks like he's going to Miami. I know he's supposed to meet with Philadelphia. We talked about it a little bit earlier on the show, so we'll just reset that. I think from a basketball standpoint, Kevin Love could help the Warriors, but there aren't a lot of minutes for Kevin Love on the roster where they already have JaMychal Green, I think, playing in that slot. And there were a lot of people on the text line, Whitey, what if JaMychal Green gets hurt? What if Dante DiVincenzo gets hurt? You got to have insurance policies as cases to be made for not only Love, but Patrick Beverley.
But the thing is, if you're Kevin Love and the Warriors say, we want to bring you in case JaMychal Green gets hurt, and Kevin Love's going to say, all right, never mind. I'm not going to go there. That's the thing.
Deuces.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point. Ben in Oakland next. 888-957-9570. What's going on, Ben?
Hey, I listen to a lot of sports talk radio, so I've heard these topics discussed over and over. So I wanted to talk about why Steph makes so many turnovers while why Draymond doesn't shoot so well. So what I was talking about was peripheral vision versus hard focus. So, like Ben Simmons and the defenders who don't score a lot, they live in their peripheral vision world because they're looking at the whole court. Curry, who's more of a scorer, is looking individually at the rim, so he's able to hit all those shots. And whenever I see players off, it's like they're always picking up the rim a little bit late. So I just wanted to bring up something completely different so that we just have a new topic to talk about.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Steph Curry averages almost 6.5 assists per game, so I think he's got pretty good peripheral vision.
I think he does.
Yeah.
So the issue being the turnovers, I'm going to be honest, I kind of glazed over that one.
Well, it is interesting. It's another problem with the Warriors, and it's been forever. Too many turnovers. And Steph's been, Steph and Draymond have been chief offenders there. But you're running the show, JD. I don't think that's our new topic.
No, it's not. It's not.
Thanks, Ben.
Back to the Xfinity Mobile text line. An interesting question here. Do you think Wiseman would have helped in certain playoff series when other teams have a big man that can rebound, such as Memphis and Denver? And the answer is no. And I think that is a misnomer. Like, he was not going to be like the last thing the Warriors would have wanted to have done would have been, hey, we're playing Jokic. Wise, go get him. Like, that's the answer to that question is maybe the biggest reason why he's not on the roster anymore is that they looked at that and said, no way.
Go back, look at the video, go back, look at the box score. We saw that not that long ago. Wiseman played against Denver, and he was playing reasonably well, and then Jokic came in the game, and it's, this is no knock on Wiseman because Jokic is, he may be 3-time MVP, but he destroyed Wiseman. And no surprise, that's not a knock on Wiseman, but to the question there, no, not really an option, right? We saw what that would look like just a few weeks ago, and it was as dreadful as you'd think.
Yeah.
And again, that's you can't expect Wiseman to do better against Jokic, but he's just no match for him defensively.
No question.
None.
And I think that is what we had started to see in the regular season, even before the injuries had popped in, was the fact that there just couldn't be regular minutes assigned to him against anybody.
And in Memphis, what are we talking like? James Wiseman's going to hold his own against Steven Adams?
And he did have, in fairness, a 6 or a 7 minute stretch, I think, on Christmas.
You're right.
He played very well against Memphis. But again, that's one game, and it was, really.
Steven Adams missed that game? I
think he missed their most recent game.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he missed their most recent game back in January. 888-957-9570. We're halfway through here. Man, flying along here. Phone line's open.
Let's
it's
go.
John Dickinson and Whitey Gleason. Warriors this week on 95.7 The Game.
Hi, I'm Brian Bakhtiari, Executive Manager of Stevens Creek Subaru. With all the recent storms in California, it's a reminder of the power and unpredictability of Mother Nature. At Stevens Creek Subaru, we understand the importance of all-wheel drive, whether it's getting you to the slopes or coast.
come asking some simple questions. What's a realistic finish for the Warriors over the final 24, as they are 29-29 with 24 games to go? Laid it out at the top of the show: 22-7 home, 7-22 away. And can this team flip a switch? We've also dissected a lot of the Wiseman, Gary Payton II trade, everything that didn't go down as far as the Warriors' interest in OG Anunoby, and also looked at some of the other teams in the Western Conference who I think we both are aligned in thinking got better, Clippers and Suns among them.
Couple questions. I know we are hearing from all the text line GMs, which we appreciate. Even if we disagree, we appreciate it. Has anyone mentioned Russell Westbrook to the Warriors. Has anyone mentioned, as I said earlier, Guillermo after his strong performance in the celebrity game? Anyone mentioned Guillermo as maybe a potential buyout pickup?
No Guillermo. Actually, one Guillermo, and then this person said over Westbrook.
Okay, I agree with that one.
Guillermo over Westbrook. But yeah,
I know fans are going to fan, and here we have the second part of the season, not the second half ahead of us, and you don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I think we all know, right? The Warriors they're up against it right now. And last year, they win the championship, which was great, a surprising championship even to them. And then with the young players, they could envision this bridge that they were building to the future. And where they are now is, well, that bridge has crumbled. And we don't know if this is the end of the run of this core. And so things are about as bleak as they've been for a while, even during the terrible, the gap year and the year that followed. You still knew that, well, Clay's coming back eventually. And now it's like, you're really staring at your own mortality in terms of this dynasty. That's just where it is right now.
It is. And there's all the decisions coming up as far as what does Draymond Green decide to do? What does Bob Myers decide to do?
Yes.
And the 2 timeline thing has been,
I
think, blown up. Like, to me, when you admit you whiffed on Wiseman, and that is another fact here of the last 2 weeks. The Warriors admitted that they blew the Wiseman pick. Now, they're hoping to salvage some of the value by getting Gary Payton II back, and he can potentially help them in a playoff for over the next couple of years in the more win-now mode. But it's an admission that there are not 2 timelines anymore.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely pivotal, because when they had that chance, a rare chance to get the second pick, and they went with a guy that they hoped would obviously be a foundational piece, and they've all referred to him as a foundational piece, and they knew, high risk, high reward. Well, it didn't work out, so that you got to reassess your whole plan going forward now.
One interesting component to the GP acquisition, and this has popped up a little bit on the text line, Xfinity mobile text line, bringing Peyton back seems to shut the door on any chance of DiVincenzo's return, unlikely, though, that it might have been. I think that is an additional factor, is the fact that DiVincenzo's been such a productive player that he will opt out and have options.
Yeah, and it also tells you that part of this trade is the Warriors thinking about next year and not just the rest of this year, planning ahead for what happens when Dante DiVincenzo leaves.
Yeah, because Peyton may not play at all this year.
Yeah.
I mean, depending upon how – like, the Warriors have to get to a point where Peyton can be a factor, get to a point without him to where he can be a factor.
When it comes right down to it, the reason essentially that I disagree with you on whether they could make the trade, should have made the trade, and I understand all your points, and they're obviously very valid points. I just think the Warriors are at the point where they looked at Wiseman and said, no, it's just not going to happen. It's a sunk cost. This is a guy that can't get on the floor, and if we can get something back from him and move on and not have to pay him anymore, we don't want to admit that publicly, but we're better off. So I think, and I understand that reasoning. I think that it's tough to sell, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that's just where they were with him.
Now, I don't disagree with that part. I really don't. The Wiseman part of it is not as much of a factor as you're really betting that GP's going to be healthy, and able to play, and that you're going to be good enough without him. See, to me, they wanted GP2 for the now, for the boost. Like, they needed, we talked a couple of weeks ago before the deadline. I think we closed the show. I do think the Warriors need an infusion. They need
I've been saying that for
veteran
months.
Players
yes.
to know that the front office and the ownership is still fighting for them. And I think this trade, if GP is healthy, would have done that. Like, if he had been healthy flying around the first couple of games after the deadline against the Lakers and the Clippers and Washington, and immediately plugging back in as part of the rotation, like, that would have given them a lift that they needed at a point where they got to win some games here. Now, they've got to go out of the final. I mean, at least probably 14-10, I would say, in the final 24 minimum to make sure you're in the play-in tournament. I mean, I guess you probably could go 500 and end up in the play-in tournament, but if you wanted a shot at making a run at 6th, you need to 14-10, 15-9, 16-8, probably.
Don't you think that where they are now, no matter what happens the rest of this year, unless they win a championship. Another championship changes everything, of course. But in the offseason, you don't want to think that far ahead. Bob Myers has said, you ask him, as Guru did, what about your future? He's like, I don't want to go there yet. We're focusing on this year. So I understand that. But we can look bigger picture, like look beyond this year. Okay, this team is currently constructed. How do they get better next year, JD?
Yeah,
when you're an aging team with a core that may be starting to fade, maybe not. You've been relying on that core, and in the NBA, as I've said, it makes sense. You've got a core, a championship core. You ride it out. In other sports, maybe you want to trade guys before they're past their primes. In the NBA, they're so valuable, you ride them out. So if that's where you are, though, after this year, given how far you are into the luxury tax, your younger players haven't quite come through the way you hoped. Then what are you going to do in the next offseason?
Well, you've got your mid-level exception, right? And that's and potential trades. And I think that's where they're going to have to re-examine.
With perhaps a new GM making those decisions for you.
And that's where I think you have to choose a pivot point as to how close or far away are you with that core. And look, Draymond's got a part in this because he can opt out. Klay Thompson's going to be in the final year of a deal and has played much closer to the old Klay level in the last 6 weeks than he did prior
I agree
to
with
that.
you. By the way,
he's going to want to get paid again.
Yeah, the fact that he played back-to-back games, we're being a little negative here, but as you said, the fact that he played, really, really great.
Big positive. And we'll see. I think they've got 3 sets of back-to-backs left, I believe, that the first 2 games out, and then the next week, and then I think there's one more set of back-to-backs later on in the season. And so, if he can play in a couple of those, then that is a great sign for his future. But
yes,
Klay Thompson's a $40 to $42 million player right now. Is Klay Thompson, he's taking a pay cut, right? Like he's going to have to. And is he going to be willing to do that? And again, we're going a year ahead, but when you start looking at the dynasty and trying to line everybody up and can you make another run at it? These are all things that I think are going to be determined in large part by how this season ultimately ends.
And I know it's also been reported that if Bob Myers were to leave for whatever reason, and to me it looks like if I had to bet on something right now,
like he is.
I'd go that way. I don't pretend to know, but that to me it appears to be leaning that way. But, Steph and Bob Myers are really happy. And Draymond and Bob Myers, are really close. So,
Steve Kerr.
Yeah.
Who's going to have one more year left.
Yeah.
You got to make a decision on Steve this offseason.
Yes.
Really.
What does that do to your relationships with some of your key members of the organization here if Bob Myers is no longer part of it?
All right. 888-957-9570. Let's get back to the phones. James in San Ramon is next here on a Saturday. What's going on, James?
What's up, gentlemen? Look, I think the GP2 trade is criminally underrated. I think the ability that he has to disrupt the flow of offense against the other team is so important for the Warriors, right? They got Draymond to cover in the back, but GP2 up front disrupting the flow of that offense is massive. I think that's going to be what carries us through the playoffs and gives us a chance to win it.
No doubt. I no disagreement. He's got to be healthy to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
He's got to be really healthy.
Yeah. And, he at times, and I noticed this even last year with GP2, he didn't, and remember there were games where Steve Kerr would say, hey, I probably should have played him more, and didn't, and those games go by. I think there's a minute limit for Peyton II for his body and the way that he plays to where he is not somebody that can play more than maybe 20 minutes.
Well, that certainly could be the case, whether it has been or not, I don't know. But if he's coming back from an injury, it's a great point, though, because, defense is their biggest issue, and he's so good at putting pressure on the basketball, which I think is, James said it's an underrated trade. I think it's one of the most underrated aspects of defense in the NBA when you can have a player who can put pressure on the basketball. It's very, very disruptive.
Bob Myers was on with Steiny and Guru, and he referenced a bunch of the close games that the Warriors have lost and the blown leads and how that really has been why their record is not where they would want it to be. And he invoked GP2 and said, hey, how many of those games do we win if potentially GP2 is a factor? It's a couple of possessions, it's a couple of stops in what were overall bad defensive games, but close still to where if you did 2 or 3 more stops, maybe you win games versus lose them. I don't love going down that rabbit hole. I think it's not a great sign when you're president of basketball operations and general manager is going down that rabbit hole. Typically, that's more of a, Homer, broadcaster type rabbit hole.
Well, that's what GMs say after a trade, though. I mean, for a guy, I understand.
But I do think there's some validity to, all right, a couple of stops in a couple of these games, maybe the whole thing looks completely different.
Yeah.
There's some validity to
We like to talk about big names at the buyout because it's nice to think about what an impact these guys could have. If GP2 is healthy, I think you'd agree with this. If he is healthy at some point, he can really help this team. How much better? I don't know. I don't think he flips them from, a team that is in the play-in situation now to, all right, look out, Denver Nuggets, but he makes them a much better team with the playoffs looming. So, again, as the Warriors did last year, they're kind of trying to thread the needle on this with his health and Steph's health and the postseason coming up. But if they can thread that needle, it's going to be a lot brighter than it looks right now for them in the postseason.
415 Xfinity Mobile text line. JD, so you would have rescinded the trade, took back Wiseman, and have his attitude be crap when he comes back to sit on the bench.
You would have done that, huh?
He wasn't going to be a problem. Like, he wasn't playing anyway. So he comes back and he doesn't play. Like, it's a non-factor.
A guy who doesn't play, it doesn't matter what his attitude is, really.
Well, and they had showed they were done with him anyway.
Would have been a little embarrassing, but I don't think his attitude would have been.
It would have been awkward, I think, and it would have been unfair to him. And I said this at the time, they didn't owe him that. They didn't owe James Wiseman that. You come back, you make your $8 million or whatever it is, and you suck it up. And you're going to get dealt in the offseason, and I think you could have found another 8th or 9th man to deal him to in the off. They chose to not go down that road. That's fine. I get it. But to me, the bringing Wiseman back and sitting him on the bench and being concerned about that is a non-factor in the decision.
I think there is some upside to just being done with that, but I don't think if you brought him back, it'd be awkward. But I don't think it would have been disastrous. Why do you think ultimately it didn't work? What does it boil down to, in your opinion, as far as James Wiseman, the Warriors' second pick, foundational piece? And then, 3 years later, he's traded. What happened ultimately? Why didn't it work?
His timeline for development didn't match the Warriors' timeline for winning, I think, is the number one part. I think number two was the fact that every time he did start to maybe show an ability to fit in a little bit, he got hurt. Even if it was something as simple as right around the holidays where he started to play 5-6 minutes a half. And a couple of those games that the Warriors won during that 5-game winning streak, and then all of a sudden it's, sprained his ankle playing 3-on-3 at shoot-around, and he's out for 3 weeks or longer, if memory serves. And then it became apparent that he wasn't going to be a factor when he came back because it was going to take him too long to get back to the point. Like, every time he got hurt, it felt like he had to completely start over.
Yeah.
The development process. And I think that is really frustrating on everybody. It's like, it took 2 months to get him playable for 5 or 6 minutes, and then he gets hurt, and he's going to come back around February 1st, and then it's going to take another 2 months to get him remotely playable again. And I mean, at that point, it's April. So at that point, and we said it, and I was right about this, unpopular opinion again, a lot of those today, but I said it flat out, the fact that he was not going to be a factor for this team this season. And you could tell by about January 15th, when he didn't come back about 2 weeks after that ankle sprain, he was done.
Yeah.
In terms of ability to contribute for this team. And in that vein, I can understand where the Warriors would think if we're not going to be able to make him playable this year, then you might as well trade him because of the financial savings, and then obviously you end up getting a player that you think fits if healthy in Peyton.
I agree with all that, JD, and to me it came down to this with James Wiseman. He was a lot more raw than they realized. I think if he'd been able to play more games in college, they would have had a clearer idea of that. Maybe their thinking would have changed. Maybe his basketball sense of where he's supposed to be, maybe it would have improved. But, they were flying blind on some of that because of the pandemic and because of how few games he played. When they got him in, remember how his rookie year, it's like they couldn't decide what to do. He's not starting. He's starting. He's not starting. Well, he's going to start all the time now. And as you say, he got hurt, which I think just complicated it in terms of his development. But I think ultimately, he was a bad fit, but he was a bad fit in a lot of ways because he was just a lot more raw than the Warriors realized.
Good point. No, I think that's spot on. And I think they overrated the ability of him to just be able to come in and be a bit player while he develops. The part of, well, the Warriors core is so good and like it'll be that should make it easier on him to come in and play. And the reality is playing with Steph in particular, but Steph and Draymond, because that is the Warriors system, his inability to play with those two made it a non-starter, I think. It was just you had to get him away from Steph.
Yeah.
Get him away from Draymond. And if you can't play with those two, then what do you got?
I still hope he becomes a star. It's hard to imagine, but Detroit thinks it. Detroit's all in on him. I hope they're right. It's hard to imagine based on what we've seen and how inconsistent he's been as a Warrior.
888-957-9570. Adrian in Danville is next here on Warriors This Week. What's going on, Adrian?
Well, hi, how you doing? I just want to talk about, you guys talking about GP2 and DiVincenzo. I like GP2 and all that. He played good, but he gets hurt. If it comes down to, next year, DiVincenzo and GP2, I would rather take DiVincenzo because he's going to play. And he's not bad defensively. He's pretty good. He can pass, he can defend, and he can shoot the three. I like him. I would rather keep DiVincenzo over GP2. That's my opinion. We're not sure about GP2.
Yeah, appreciate it. I wholeheartedly agree. The problem is Dante DiVincenzo can opt out of his contract and be a free agent, and the most the Warriors would be able to offer him would be the mid-level exception. And so that's basically, I think, 6.2, between 5.6 and 6.2 million a year. And that's you can offer him a 3-year deal with raises off of whatever the highest number is for the first year, but it effectively would be about a 3-year, $20 million contract. 3 years and 18 to 20 million would be the most that the Warriors could offer DiVincenzo. I think he would think he can get more than that.
Blue Man Hoop had an interesting look at this. And Adrian, you're right, but here's the thing. DiVincenzo this year, 4.7, well, actually it's next year, $4.7 million player option for next season. And he's shooting 42%. You're right. I mean,
he should be
from
making
the three-point line.
He should be making what Gary Payton's making and maybe more.
Yeah, 4 rebounds and 3 assists a game, and he's played well defensively, and he just understood the Warriors' offense and the system right away. And because he did that, he's going to be in line for a lot more money than the Warriors can afford to pay him next year.
Yeah.
So as Blue Man Who points out that getting Peyton, in a way, it's insurance for when DiVincenzo almost certainly leaves in free agency.
No, I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
As far as where they're at with him. But yeah, you look at, if Peyton's an $8 or $9 million player, I think DiVincenzo's a $10 million player.
To Adrian's point, if you're the Warriors, you don't really have that. You can't pick one or the other.
Can DiVincenzo get a 4-year, $45 million contract somewhere? 4 and 40? Something like that? Probably, right?
Maybe.
He's 25. Right? 25, 26?
25, yes.
So, I don't know. And I think the plan all along for DiVincenzo was come to the Warriors, show he can fit in their system, put himself on display, preferably in bigger games.
Like Otto Porter last year.
He's hoping for a playoff run, I think, to showcase how much he can be. He's their 7th man right now. Let's be honest. Like, we talk about Peyton this and Kuminga that. After Jordan Poole, who's the 6th starter in a way, DiVincenzo's the next guy in the rotation, and at times DiVincenzo's played better than Poole.
It's a really smart strategy. You're so cash-strapped here. You're so far into the luxury tax. If in the offseason you can find veterans that are trying to rehab their reputations because of injury, like with Otto Porter last year, with DiVincenzo, it's great. It's a bargain, but it's just a short-term relationship. And it appears to be working out beautifully for both sides. But where the Warriors are, to Adrian's point, the Warriors don't have that option next year. Which one of these two guys do you want? Because financially, Peyton's the guy you've got under contract, and you can't afford DiVincenzo next year. You're right about how well he's playing, but just if you're the Warriors, you don't really have your pick.
And contenders are going to want him. Non-contenders are going to want him. I think a lot of teams are going to want Dante DiVincenzo in the offseason, which was all part of the plan, was to come in and play well enough to where you would be able to opt out and get paid more. The second-year player option would have been in play if he had been injured and not played well. It's like the player options only get picked up when a guy gets hurt or when a guy is extremely underwhelming. I think GP2's third year.
Okay. Yeah.
That's an option that I think would probably get picked up at $9 million or whatever.
I mentioned Blue Man Hoop. Their guesses here is that DiVincenzo could be looking at a multi-year deal worth upwards of 12 or even 15 million per season.
Okay, so there you go. So 4 and 40 is a starting point.
Yeah.
At that point, Jimmy in Dublin before the top of the hour. What's going on, Jimmy?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
I just wanted to say, man. I mean, that trade. It's kind of like the Warriors that got a second chance, with the physical and all that type of stuff. And I mean, after they already made the mistake of trading him for essentially second round draft picks. I mean, this guy, James Wiseman, he might not have. I mean, it's not even a might. He hasn't reached his potential, and that's what people usually get drafted for, especially underclassmen and things like that, is potential. So you're telling me that James Wiseman is worth? I mean, Gary Payton Jr. is worth being traded for James Wiseman? I mean, would you take Gary Payton Jr. as a second overall or third, whatever pick? Definitely not. And then I also want to say on top of that, I think DiVincenzo is definitely going to walk, because I mean, this right here was just a showcase for him, really to go get paid. And I think, like you said, I think he's going to get anywhere between, 4 years, 10 per, definitely. But I think the Warriors are going to regret giving away Wiseman, kind of like how Portland gave away Jermaine O'Neal, and then he went on to Indiana, man, and had a arguable Hall of Fame career. You guys have a good weekend.
Thanks, Jimmy. Long way to go for Wiseman, although it did take Jermaine O'Neal a few years to become a productive player, and he eventually did. But yeah, that is, I think, an under-discussed portion of this, and I think I'm more willing to absolve the Warriors from the Wiseman was never going to be that, any of that for them, because they were going to have to wait too long on the development side. But when you do just say, hey, James Wiseman for GP2, you traded the number 2 pick in the draft from a couple of years back for an 8th or a 9th man. Like that, and again, if you factor out GP2 the name and GP2 the beloved, it hits a little different.
Thanks for the call. I'm not sure that was factually correct, because I think the Pacers traded Dale Davis to the Portland Trailblazers for Jermaine O'Neal. But so I don't know if it's a matter of Portland giving up on Jermaine O'Neal. But anyway, that's the Warriors have to be, one of the things that keeps you up at night if you're in the Warriors front office, if you're Joe Lacob, just thinking about, wow, what if Wiseman ends up being like, an all-star?
Yeah.
And we
that's on the table.
We had him and gave up on him and didn't get much for him.
That's on the table. 888-957-9570. Final hour. JD and Whitey Warriors this week. That's on the table next here on 95.7 The Game.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn.
He said 78, I think.
I think he said 79, but it was but the 78 Bullets came up because they are the team with the worst record to win an NBA championship. The worst regular season record, 44 and 38.
Yeah.
So no team has won fewer than 44 and gone on to win an NBA championship.
By the way, JD, those two finals, 78, 79, it was the Bullets and the
Sonics, right? Both
and
years.
They were so bad that it was after that they started putting the finals on at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, and then that bled into what the first couple Magic Johnson years, right? With Philly and even
I remember
Philly
watching
and LA.
Julius Erving against Magic and Kareem, and you had to. I don't want to see the score. 11:30 at night. No.
So it would be on like after the late news.
Yes, and then the news would come on, and I think they'd tell you, "Here's the score." So don't turn away from your TV.
So on the news, they'd be like, "Hey, the Lakers won Game 1," and then Game 1 would air after.
I think
you had to avoid it.
Depends which channel. If it was the channel the game was on, then I think that, because they wanted you to stick around, we're going to give you the score here. So but if it was the other channels, they don't want you watching. So
right. Hey, 3 hours ago, Lakers 101, Philly 95.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I remember staying up in the dorms at Sac State with Sheena and Dana Maglaren. We were watching that Kareem with a sprained ankle, and what would that have been? Game 5, I guess, beating the Sixers.
Wow.
At 2:00 in the morning.
So Steve Kerr's not concerned about any of that.
Good.
He's not concerned about the 44-38 and what it took to win a title. I know the Rockets of 95, they won 47, I believe. They were the 6th seed in the playoffs in the Western Conference.
Never underestimate the heart of a champion.
The heart of a champion. The one misnomer about that, and I give Bob Myers credit. He's referenced that year a few times as far as a kind of a champion that's, kind of out of nowhere in a sense. They were the defending champions that year, and they also traded for Clyde Drexler in season. If you remember, they didn't have Clyde Drexler on that first championship team. They made a trade with Portland to get Clyde Drexler on the 95 team as they were in a malaise that year, and then ended up the 6th seed. And pretty remarkable feat. They won as the defending champs. They beat the 3 seed Utah. They beat the 2 seed Phoenix that year. They beat the 1 seed, which was San Antonio, the year David Robinson won the MVP of the league. And then they beat the other 1 seed in the East, Orlando, in the Olajuwon versus Shaq. That was the first time Shaq made it to the finals. And
that was poor Nick Anderson, missed 3 free throws in game 1 and was never the same.
Exactly.
Never the same player.
And Orlando blew a lead in game 1, and the Rockets ended up sweeping that series. So the Rockets as the 6th, defending champion. I think there's more similarities in a weird way to what Phoenix did in getting Durant and what the Rockets, and I know the Suns are not defending champions, but when you look at going and getting Clyde Drexler was a superstar that became the second best player with Olajuwon, who was also a superstar and a finals MVP. And they teamed those two up together, obviously the college Houston connection and all of that. And so they went on to win the title. But impressive that as a 6 seed, they beat the 3, the 2, the 1, and then the 1 in the other conference to win the title.
Well, a flagging team, a team that's struggling, what'd you say, they're in a malaise, you get that player at the deadline or whenever, it can give you that boost to put you over the top. So did the Warriors do that? It was interesting. Coach Kerr, talking to Damon Ratto, talked about how disappointed he was when they found out that GP2 had failed the physical. He says, we were excited about Gary's addition. We know what he did for us last year. We needed immediate help. We needed a boost at the deadline.
Agree.
One of the reasons for the deal. So finding out that he was going to be out for a while was frustrating, but that's the way it goes. He says, we got to find a way to keep moving forward and hopefully get him back at the end of the year.
And at the end of the year.
Hopefully
at the end of the year.
They definitely need that boost. He may... Obviously, if he can't get on the floor, he can't give it to you.
And that's where I break off. I agree with everything Steve Kerr said as to why you do the deal and what you're hoping for. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago, the fact that the Warriors did need an infusion of something. And I do think GP2 would have been that infusion. To me, they needed it now. And when they couldn't get it now, that's the point where, because I want to be clear, because I've been taking a lot of heat for my stance on the trade. It wasn't the trade initially. Although it does, James Wiseman got traded for that. Like, there is a little initial, but we had discussed the fact that was a likely outcome at this point based on Wiseman's value around the league and how poorly he'd play with the Warriors. Where it broke off for me was you're not getting that initial bump. Now you're waiting 2 months for the bump. And one, I'm not sure this Warriors team's good enough because part of it was you needed his ability now to wait around and be good enough to where his impact will be truly felt. And that's where I lean toward, I don't think I would have done the deal because you're not getting that impact until the end of the regular season.
And as I've said,
earliest.
Yeah, I would have made the deal. But to your point, even if they got GP2 from last year, if they had him back, he'd have a huge impact. In my opinion, JD, the way this team has played this year, even if you got back, boom, GP2 from last year, I still don't think that's enough for this team to win a championship. I think they needed more than that. I've been saying since at least November, if not October, that, boy, they're going to need something. They need something more if they're going to compete for a championship, going to win a championship. GP2 is a nice fit, addresses them defensively, addresses their defensive issues, but I don't think he's enough.
No, I at this point, I don't think he's enough, although he would give them that added boost, at which point the Warriors are in it, depending upon whatever.
Like you mentioned, the Rockets went out and got Clyde freaking Drexler.
Right, exactly. To me, that would have been the move, and it became clear the Warriors couldn't get this done because their young players' value had been lessened to a point. But if the Warriors had gone, and you know what, we weren't going to do it in the summer, but we're going to go get Durant now.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that would have been the equivalent of what the 95 Rockets did.
Yeah, and going back through history, as I mentioned last week or the week before, you look at the Lakers, and one year they got, oh, boy, we need some help here. Let's get Michael Thompson, who was a number 1 pick in the draft, or, hey, let's get Bob McAdoo, former scoring champion. So GP2 is a really good fit, but frankly, I don't think he's enough.
So Steve Kerr's still confident, though, the Warriors can defend the title. What's a realistic expectation for the Warriors between now and the end of the year? 14 times they've been exactly 500, including right now 29-29.
You want a record?
Yeah,
I was going to say,
what's realistic to expect? Their best stretch really this year was the 10-4 stretch after they started 3-7. You could also say that the 5-game winning streak right around the holidays, that was without Steph. But, I mean, what is realistic?
I think at 44, the 78 Bullets 44 would look nice. 44-45 to me would be, wow.
15-9.
Yeah, I think you'd feel really good going into the postseason.
And healthy, assuming you had everybody at that. Because a lot of what the Warriors are trying to do is in some ways what they did last year, where they were 41-13 right around this time. Then they dealt with a bunch of injuries. Draymond went out, and then Steph went out.
Against the Celtics,
And the Warriors were hanging on for dear life to keep a top 4, top 3 seed. Ultimately, they ended up 3rd. They won their last 5 games of the regular season last year without Steph to hang on to the 3 seed, which proved to be significant as they were, I think, a game ahead of Dallas. They ended up playing Dallas in the conference finals. So they're trying to do what they did last year in the sense of not be healthy, get in, and then be healthy. All the pieces fit together and you make your run. Where I don't disagree with the theory, because it's really all they can hope for at this point.
It's just the margin for error keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
And I just don't think that this team is as good as last year's team. They're a little bit older. The pieces are not quite as finely tuned and intertwined together.
JD, I would challenge anyone who disagrees. I agree with you. I would challenge anyone who disagrees to tell us, no, this team is better than last year's because of this or this or this. I don't think there's anything there.
And it's not that they can't do it, but it's not the same. It just shouldn't be viewed as the same. It just shouldn't be viewed as they just did this. No, they were a 53-win team last year. There is a significant difference between a 53-win team and a 43-win team.
Now, I will say this. Going into the postseason, it looks like whoever they end up playing against, they're going to be underdogs, and they really thrive in that role. But I think...
I can get you through a round or two.
Yeah, but they do. They like being in that role. I was just going to say, when all is said and done, I think we're probably going to look back at last year's championship and go, man, that was more amazing than we realized at the time.
Without a doubt. Look, here's the other thing. I think the Warriors can win a round or two. It's can you win 4? And I know I say that every week. Like if the Warriors were the 7 seed and playing Memphis in the first round, I think they could beat Memphis. In fact, I think they might beat Memphis. But are you going to beat Memphis and the Clippers and Phoenix and Milwaukee? That's where I think it gets tough. Like, and you can win a series without home court advantage. Like that's it, and you're right. They will be motivated as the underdog. They will want to show that they're much better than their 7 seed, if that's what it winds up being.
Yeah.
If they have to win a play-in game just to get in, everybody would favor them in probably any iteration of a play-in game. Warriors versus Minnesota. Who's picking Minnesota? Warriors versus the Pelicans. Who's picking the Pelicans? Warriors versus Utah. Who's picking that? The Warriors would be a favorite in probably any possible matchup if they're healthy.
You've got some dilemmas staring you in the face right now. For example, Steph comes back. Let's say Steph's like, and I'm sure the medical staff would say, we're not playing you until you're 100%. But let's say he was like, I can go. Well, do you wait until he's healthy because only a healthy Steph gives you a chance to win a championship? Or do you play him when he can play to increase your chances of improving your playoff status?
You got to get in. You got to get in. I think the Warriors are probably safe, but at any point, and I know we talked earlier about, hey, they're 9-11 without Steph, which is actually pretty good. Like you'd take basically 500 a game or two off without Steph over an extended period. That's a quarter of the season.
But if he hobbles into the postseason, maybe he comes back soon enough to get you into the postseason. If he hobbles into the postseason, you have no chance.
That's true. But you also you can't play around with it at the level you could play around with it last year. You had enough of a cushion to where you knew you were going to be in.
Yeah, I get that.
You knew you were going to be top 6.
Mm-hmm.
You really knew you were going to be top 4 and all. By the end, for the most part, you might have been 4th, but at that point, like you had a certain level established that you were going to get to. To me, and again, I know they've been. I don't want to contradict myself because they've been not, but 9-11. Ain't gonna get you. Like if you go the equivalent of 9-11 over the last 14,
night.
Yeah, you're at that. You're gonna if you say you're gonna go 11-13 in the last 24 games. Well, then you might miss the play-in tournament.
Right.
So to me, you can't play that game of just get in and be 10. Just get it because every spot you are down farther makes it harder. It's an extra road game. It's an extra opponent you're gonna have to play. I mean, you don't want to be. You imagine the Warriors having to play, let's say, a play-in game in New Orleans and then a play-in game in, San Francisco, with a day in between like that. Would you want to do that? If that would
not
take
ideal.
That would take it like all of those things. Would you want to play in Minnesota one night and then have to come back and play in San Francisco the next night? With a night in between.
Right. Yeah.
So you want to avoid all those little potential pitfalls. It's not that you can't win it, but every extra step takes a toll. And I think because the Warriors are champions, we tend to just throw out the fact that those little steps matter. They matter. And last year, they didn't have to go through as many of those little steps in the lead up. They didn't.
So Peyton is going to be reevaluated in a month. It's going to be reevaluated.
March 13th.
And there's no guarantee, as you've pointed out, as we know from our experience with these things and with the Warriors, there's no guarantee that at that point they go, okay, good to go. I mean, that's just when they reevaluate him. So when is Steph getting reevaluated? Right after the All-Star break?
Yeah,
next
and
week?
they've offered there has been no semblance of a timeline even speculated upon with it. Like nobody has written or leaked or said 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, like that. Like there hasn't even been a thought. And I think they're a step away from even knowing that.
That could be. I wonder
how
also.
How does he look on the 23rd when they come back from the break? And then depending upon how he looks on the 23rd, it's all right, now it's 2 weeks, or now it's 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Or now it's 6 weeks.
I think they've learned that if you give a timeline, like he could be back at this point, and then for whatever reason the player is not, then it looks really bad. I think they got burned last year. Remember when they said Wiseman, Clay will be back around Christmas and Wiseman should be back Thanksgiving. And he wasn't back at all. And I think that kind of blew up in their faces.
Clay ended up January 9th.
Yeah, and they realized there's just no reason to give people timelines unless we're, dead certain of them, and you never can be with an injury.
And the Warriors undersold and in some ways over-delivered on Steph's shoulder injury. Now, shoulder is different, but it was... Yeah, I think initially it was 4 to 6 weeks, and he came back in a day under 4 weeks. So he actually came back early. If you look at what that injury had been projected to be, everybody, surprise, Steph's playing against Phoenix tonight.
Yes.
And then they lost that game with the Suns to the back end of the Suns roster. Let's get to Rich in Fremont, 888-957-9570. Rich, we appreciate you calling in as always. How you doing, my man?
Hey, guys, I appreciate you guys, too, giving up your Saturday the way you do, and you guys do a fine job, so thank you for taking my call. I still in the back of my mind, I still think as much as I like getting back GP2, I don't like the way they did it. I'm sure everybody's voiced the same concern. I think Wiseman as a whole is going to make a splash in the NBA, a big one. And the reason why, you said it earlier, Jermaine O'Neal, when he came and made his splash, it took him some years to understand. And I think it's going to take some time for Wiseman to understand. I also believe one of the reasons why Wiseman wasn't fitting here in Golden State is because of the fact that he, for the most part, wanted to play his brand of basketball. His brand of basketball is to, present some offense. He also has no problem rebounding, but he likes
He likes shooting the three. He even likes, going to the rack. That's what he likes to do. But when he was in Golden State, they wanted him, to box guys out. They wanted him to grab rebounds. They wanted him to play defense. And that's just not his game. That's the reason why I think when he's in Detroit, he's probably over time. He's gonna make a splash. And the other thing is that I think with Golden State, one of the reasons why they're not able to beat a lot of teams like they used to is because a lot of teams have caught up to Golden State. They know the way Golden State shoots. And I think this happened after Steph. I think the Warriors had beaten Houston for the second time, and Steph did this promotion with Masterclass, right? And he was basically showing people, the game of basketball, how to shoot and everything. And I'm sorry, guys, I just can't get this out of my head, the idea that one of those shooting coaches pulled some of his guys off those teams and said, guys, watch this. And it was like after that, all of a sudden, the shooting in the NBA changed. And all of a sudden, you got teams that can come in, and now they can compete with Golden State because they can shoot just as good as they can. Guys, thanks for your time, and thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, the other teams in terms of small ball, small ball's all over the league, having as many players as possible to shoot and interchangeable defensive players, being able to switch.
Positionless.
Being able to switch 1 through 5 defensively, and players that, if they don't do anything else well, can defend a little bit and knock down a three from specific areas on the court that can fit into an offense. Like all of those things that the Warriors were doing, they did it with a little bit more flow and the pace and space and ball movement and player movement and all of that than some other teams did. But there are a bunch of teams in the league that took the Rockets approach to figure out where guys can shoot it well and put them in those spots and just have them shoot those shots over and over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. The Jermaine O'Neal comp for Wiseman is really interesting. And a previous caller also mentioned that. I didn't really give him his due, but thank you, Rich, for pointing that out. Just looking at Jermaine O'Neal, and when he came into the league, he came out of high school, and he was the 17th pick, and he was 3 years in the league there with Portland. Actually played, 4 years with Portland. Didn't do much. He was 18, 19, 20, and 21. Then they ended up trading him for a really good player in Dale Davis. But he was just so raw. So as I look at this, and I remember how good he became, the thing is that, he was so raw, and he was a 17th pick. And the Warriors, the risk they assumed by taking James Wiseman with the second pick was enormous. And I'm sure they knew that. As we've said, high risk, high reward, but he was so raw. And then for them not to have the time to wait and see if he is close to the player that they thought he was, that's what boxed them in. They decided, our core is getting older. We need to replenish our core. Let's get this guy who could become a great player. And a swing and a miss. Maybe it happens down the road, but they ran out of time waiting for that to happen because they're so deep into the luxury tax. And turns out the core players were going to be around longer than they thought they might.
And they didn't realize that the championship window was still open.
Exactly.
And I think they bet that the championship window was closed.
Yes.
At the moment they drafted James Wiseman, you have to, and this I don't think is an excuse. They were...
But it's the reason. You can understand the reasons they did.
They were 15-50, and that afternoon, Klay Thompson sustained the Achilles injury.
Right.
So they were 15-50 and didn't really know what they had, but knew they weren't going to have Klay coming back. And at that point, they really didn't even know what Jordan Poole was either.
Of course, yes.
So there were a lot of there is some revisionist history, I think, to the way it looks now with everybody back to a form that they had before. And
they also didn't know if Kevon Looney had a future in the NBA.
They didn't even, and again, not to get lost in the weeds, but they barely had Andrew Wiggins for a handful of games before everything shut down. There was a lot of unknowns surrounding that team as to what level they could be at. And then Steph, by the end of that Wiseman rookie year, was like, oh God, Steph is still MVP caliber because he carried him to that 15-5. And the rest is obviously history. 888-957-9570. One final segment straight ahead. Woo, we are flying along here on a Saturday. 95.7 The Game.
Did you know that most people wait 6 or 7 years before they buy a new TV? That's a lot of time in front of one TV. So why not get one of the best sets for the next 7 years? Like one of the top-rated Samsung, LG, or Sony models. Too expensive?
just the fervor and the fire and the passion for this Warriors team, even at 29-29. There is still, I think, a palpable optimism that the Warrior fan base has that this team, because they were able to do it last year, because of the champion's blood, is going to be able to mediocre West to a certain extent, get on a run.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think even the most optimistic Warrior fans have to acknowledge that, the end may be near here. So it just ratchets up the importance of every decision they make here. And last year was the same way, and it ended up so happily, of course, but it was a roller coaster ride. And this year, back on the roller coaster, the offseason promises to be much of the same. So we appreciate the chance to, chop it up on all these matters with you every Saturday.
A couple of text messages on the Xfinity mobile text line. We'll get back to the phones as well. 925, if the Warriors knew GP2 was not going to pass his physical, do you think they would have kept Saddiq Bey? I read that because that has come up a couple of times. I don't think Saddiq Bey was ever the deal. I think it was always, and maybe there's been some reporting on this that I haven't put two and two together on, but I think the Saddiq Bey for Wiseman deal was always he was going to be going to Atlanta, and I think it was a 2-team deal that became a 3-team deal that became a 4-team deal, and obviously it was ultimately submitted as a 4-team deal, which meant it couldn't be amended after the deadline. But I don't think the Warriors, they were always, hey, we want to get Gary Payton out of this.
Yeah.
And Saddiq Bey was a means to facilitate it.
Saddiq Bey's a nice player, didn't he? I think he had a 50-point game a couple years ago.
Well, remember that game winner he had against the Warriors this year?
So I understand why fans get excited. To me, he's a player that, if you're looking at it as a potential Warrior fit, I don't think he's that great of a fit. I think he looks better as, man, he could really help you. Where would you play him? Whose minutes would he take? I don't think he's a great defender. He's not an especially efficient offensive player, in my opinion. So based on those things, I'm with you. I don't think the Warriors ever really wanted him here. Last week, I think it was some people were saying, well, wait, if the Peyton thing doesn't go through, can they still get Saddiq Bey? And I don't think the Warriors ever really wanted to do that.
No, I think it was always get GP2 back and Knox and acquiring the picks and Atlanta, and it was all one thing that ended up being put together as the deadline approached. A couple other ones. I think this goes to the two sides here as far as where Warrior fans are. 559, there's only 5 teams better than the Warriors right now. And then the other aspect of that is Warriors are cooked. It's going to take a miracle. Those are back-to-back text messages.
Well, do you know, is that 5 teams better in the whole league?
Yeah, I think it's more than that. But yeah, in the whole league.
Okay.
Right now, Denver's better. Phoenix is better. The Clippers are better for sure.
I think there's 5 teams probably better than them in the West at least.
I think Memphis is better right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't beat them, but I think Memphis is better right now.
And I still think Boston and Milwaukee are the 2 best teams in the whole league.
I would agree with that. I think Philly's better than the Warriors right now.
Mm-hmm. But it's not. It happens. It's so hard to win and then win again, and they've done it over and over 4 times. It gets really difficult.
One other one I wanted to throw at you here, the 510. We were talking about the 2 timelines before we get back to the phones, and it's funny. I had forgotten, and it was always assumed that the Warriors had been, Bob Myers, Joe Lacob, on the statement of 2 timelines. And Bob was on with Steiny and Guru at one point, and he kind of threw it back at them as, well, did I ever say that? And I don't think we ever said that. The 510, it says 2 timelines was a media concoction. I don't think it was a media concoction.
It wasn't a concoction. It was a media estimate or label put on what the Warriors clearly were doing. Yeah, the Warriors didn't declare it, but you could see clearly that's what they were doing. That's, as I said last week, all teams do that. All organizations, to a degree, do that. You could see the Warriors were hoping that they'd found their future core players while they still were trying to get everything they could out of the championship core. So that was 2 timelines. Whether they said that or not, it was crystal clear that that's what they were doing, and it wasn't a bad idea. It's just it was difficult to pull off, and ultimately it failed.
It ultimately failed. And that doesn't mean that Kuminga or Moody won't be productive players.
What is the deal with Moody?
Baldwin.
Why can't Moody play?
I don't think he moves well enough defensively.
I think you're right.
I think it's a body type issue.
He fouls too much and he turns the ball over.
He doesn't handle it well enough to be to put the ball in his hands.
He's a little bit of a tweener.
Right? He doesn't shoot it well enough to consistently enough to be considered a wing. He's He's a little small for a wing, but he isn't quick enough to be a guard. I
think you're right.
Ball handling guard. Like I think his body type. Like I think if he was 2 inches taller, you'd be like, oh, he's a 3-and-D wing, but he's really not.
I remember when he was drafted. I may have been on with you and Dibs, and we were talking to somebody who covered him in college, and somebody was like, they're going to love this guy. But even that person said, he's not that quick laterally. And I remember thinking, wait, this is a guy who's in favor of him, says he's not that quick laterally in college. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think maybe that has caught up to him a little bit. But it is a bit of a puzzle because at times last year he looked so good, right? And he's always had that demeanor that led you to believe he is, in terms of his basketball maturity, he's very advanced.
Right. And I think if he had been a little bit better defender, a little bit better ball handler, or just a more consistent shooter, I think if he had consistently been able to make threes when he's been in the game, I think he would play more, but
we've always said that about him.
It just hasn't been any of it that has worked out. And I know at times Steve Kerr, I think, is hidden a little bit behind, well, he's a guard, and when we have all the guards, that he's the fifth guard, and so you're not going to play five guards. But then Steph goes out and Ty Jerome goes right in, and Ty Jerome becomes the guard that hasn't been playing because Steve Kerr believes in his ability to get them into their offense and handle the ball. Like Ty Jerome, it's not so much Ty Jerome's better or worse, although I think he has been better. It's Ty Jerome has a handle and
he's solid.
Also is a much more consistent shooter.
The good news is Ty Jerome has been really good for you this year, and you've really relied on him. The bad news is you've really relied on Ty Jerome this year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No doubt.
That's where you are.
No doubt. And you have to rely on those kinds of players if you're going to be in the Warriors' plight as far as the luxury tax goes. But at the same time, it's also unfair when those players don't come through, Ty Jerome and Anthony Lamb, to put the blame on them as if, oh, those guys stink. No, they're actually really helping you because they've played a lot.
Yep.
And helped you win games. Jason in Oakland, 888-957-9570. We got one line open right now here between now and 1 o'clock. What's going on, Jason?
How you guys doing?
Good.
That tell you that how important Otto Porter was in GP2 last season, everything you guys are talking about. Otto Porter come off the bench. He played solid team defense, and he made his threes. So that's telling you why we losing at least about 10 games. If we had GP and Otto Porter, we probably would have won this season because them losing by 6 and 7 and 10 points and not really scoring in the fourth quarter with Otto Porter on that wing and he knocking down that shot all the time. That's them losses that we, has taken this season. And another thing I want to say is I don't want to pick on Poole, but he doesn't play good team defense. And I heard Draymond alluding to it, but he didn't want to say his name because he looked at Poole plenty of times. And I was looking at some of the film, just watching some of the games, and he'd look at Poole not sliding over and get in front of the guy. He'd just swing at the guy, and Draymond Green has put his head down. So I think that's when it comes to when he's talking about the cohesion on the court. It's sometimes it's one player that'll kill a whole team, especially if you're playing basketball with your friends, and one guy, he's just not playing defense, and the guy passes him up, hitting layups or whatever the case may be. So that's all I want to say. Them 10 wins we could have had if we had Otto Porter and GP2.
Appreciate it. In fairness, Otto hasn't played a lot this year, and GP's only played the last 15. But as far as the Poole Draymond point, that has been noticeable. There have been a lot of, and this is from the team defensive standpoint, because I think that's astute. There have been times where there have been simple effort-based plays defensively where Poole just loses somebody, and you're right. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Right at the point of attack, which is kind of important.
Yeah.
As we've said before, the best rim protectors are the people that don't let anybody get into the paint in the first place.
And the problem with Poole's defense is when it is bad, it is noticeably bad. It is egregious.
Isn't it kind of? It's kind of. Don't you watch them sometimes and go, "What was that? What are you doing?"
Well, and it's and it's the type of mistakes that make it look, even if it's not 100% true, it makes it look like you don't care.
Well, like the
or
caller,
you're not trying
like
hard.
Jason said, like swing at a guy instead of slide in front of him, kind of swing your arm at him.
The matador, right?
He's I I think Jordan Poole is always going to be just kind of a puzzle because he's so good at times. And there's times when he's bad. He's really bad.
And why are the Warriors 9-11? And 9-11, like that's some great thing. It's not. But the Warriors are 9-11 without Steph. Why are the Warriors 9-11 without Steph and not 3-17? Jordan Poole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in lies the rub, if you will, with Jordan Poole is that. You look at the 9-11 without Steph, and the people that are frustrated with Poole would say, well, that should actually be 3 or 4 games better, and it would be if Poole had done this, that, and the other. But the reality is if you don't have Poole, you're probably You've probably won 3 or 4 of those games, and your season's cooked at that point.
And they rely on him so much for his scoring when Steph's out. And they have to put up with the rest of it and hope that he cares to give them better defense night to night.
I want to come back to Jordan Poole as well because I think it relates to next year. And how does this year end, and what do the Warriors do, and all the decisions they're going to have to make. Dan in Berkeley, though, is next on Warriors This Week. What's going on, Dan?
Dan the man.
Hi. Hey. I want to talk about 2 things. One, I back you up on Wiseman. I've watched basketball for 60 years, and I can't understand why he can't do a pick. And they've been working with him. You know what I mean? He's supposed to have private tutors, so that... To me, if you can't learn how to do a pick, then he's not going to be a good ball player. The other comment I'm going to make is no one has talked about this at all. I know they're not going to win again, Warriors. So that's my assumption. But I think PBJ should be played instead of Green because I've watched him closely. In the few minutes he's played, and he's as good a defensive player. He can't jump as high. But he's a good, solid, he knows how to play defense, and he's obviously better offensively. And you know what? He's not a bad rebounder. So, that I would probably give the edge to Green on that. But that's my thought. And if he played, these last 24 games, that would really set him up for next year.
Thanks for the call. I've been impressed with Patrick Baldwin Jr. in the time that he's played, his ability to shoot the ball above.
And he's only 20.
Yeah, above everything else. I think there could be a find there, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm not playing him ahead of Draymond, but
I think he meant JaMychal Green, but I would imagine he meant JaMychal Green and not Draymond. But he's also. JaMychal Green's a 5. JaMychal Green's a 5, and Patrick Baldwin Jr. is a 3-4.
Yeah, I'm with you on Baldwin.
He's long too. I don't know that he's a great defender at this point. In fact, I think he's probably a bad defender, but he's so comfortable shooting it that I feel like you could get away with having him out there. And, if he's just competent defensively, just doesn't kill you level defensively.
Yeah, and he helped him, too, during that previous stretch when Steph was out a little bit. And you're right. I mean, the thing that jumps out about him, there's talk about he's the coach's son, great basketball IQ. But, man, he can really shoot the ball. He can shoot the 3 ball.
No doubt. And so I think that, a year from now, would it surprise you if a year from now we're talking about, Patrick Baldwin Jr. is a factor for the Warriors.
The 2 timeline plan is still alive, JD. It's still alive with PBJ.
To me, it's alive. And I've said this about Patrick Baldwin Jr. I think Patrick Baldwin Jr., for as young as he is and where he is in his career, he's ahead of any of the picks that the Warriors have had in terms of ability.
That was a great pick.
At this stage of his career.
Yeah, it was a great pick.
He's not even 6 months into his career. I mean, he's 4 months into his career, and he looks much more playable at that level than any of the other players have looked 3 or 4 months into their careers.
Do you consider Jordan Poole part of the future, if you will, 2 timeline plan?
I think he definitely, yes. I think he was factored into that. I view him more as the championship core. I think there's almost there's Steph, Clay, Draymond, right? And then there's Poole and Wiggins. I think Poole and Wiggins are kind of in their own category as bridge type play. But no, he's
only 23.
Poole was considered part of the second timeline because remember at one point it was Poole's going to be the Steph and Moody's going to be the Clay and then PBJ and Kuminga and Wiseman. Right, that was the 5. And then Ryan Rollins is going to be off the bench because he's
right.
Right.
Yeah. I because he's been here so long now. He was here in that, the Eric Paschall year. He seems like he's more of a veteran, but he's definitely part of that 2 timeline plan, which I think has been one of the reasons that that he, for example, that led to the punch. I think his teammates see him as like, he's a symbol of what the front office has planned for us, and he's going to replace us someday.
And let's be honest, the rat on the table about the 2 timelines is the older players there was a disconnect between the older players and the younger players, and I think the disconnect is exemplified by the punch. I think
do
you're
too.
spot on, and I think there was a you guys can't cut it component from the championship core players, and I think it's been masked, but the fan base chooses, the front office screwed up, or Steve Kerr won't play these guys. I think part of the reason why Steve Kerr didn't play them is because he knows that the Steph, Clay, Draymonds don't want him playing with them because they hurt them.
You had Iguodala a couple years ago, it might have been last year, talking about how, it's disrespectful to the veterans that are here, the way they're having them, instead of going out and get veterans, they're having them play with young players. And it just kind of whoosh, went away. I mean, Andre Iguodala said that publicly.
He did.
Yeah.
And again, it was glossed over. Why? Because the Warriors won a title.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Warriors won a title because those guys didn't play a lot. If any, very few. I know Kuminga had there was a game or two in the playoffs. Kuminga helped them. There was a game or two in the playoffs. Moody helped them. But for the most part, those guys by design did not play.
Poole
again, but that's where I put Poole in the other category.
Yes. That's
where I put Poole in the if Kuminga and Moody and Wiseman could contribute at the Jordan Poole level, then there would be 2 timelines because those guys would have been 6, 7, 8, 9 in the rotation, but they weren't able to. The quick thought on Jordan Poole before we wrap up with our final 2 callers of the afternoon here. Jordan Poole is where I think the Warriors do have the ability to retool, restructure in the offseason because he's going to become a $30 million average contract player, and that gives the Warriors a lot more options in terms of trade. And I said this at the time. I thought, and maybe I was wrong on this, I don't know, but I thought I would have paid Poole before this season started. I'd not have him worry about getting his big payday, whatever. It's kind of irrelevant now, but the one thing I did say at the time was just because Jordan Poole gets paid doesn't mean Jordan Poole is going to be on the roster long term. And I think if you're looking at how do the Warriors retool, let's say they keep Draymond. Obviously, Steph and Clay aren't going anywhere right now. Wiggins, you need him. You like him. Looney's a glue. Like, how would you take away to also get better? It's Jordan Poole making $30 million plus X, Y, and Z in the future to try and bring another player that can be a rotation player back.
I agree with you, but I think it hinges on what decision they make in terms of where they're going from here. For example, if Bob Myers steps away, and if maybe that means, Kerr doesn't have a future here, then I think maybe, all right, Jordan Poole's going to lead us into the future. If, on the other hand, you're going to have a continuation of the current culture, I agree with you. It makes a ton of sense because to me, Jordan Poole, he deserved that ring last year. They don't win it without him. He's been very important to them this year, but I just don't think he does things always the Warrior way. And I think he still has a way of rubbing coaches the wrong way. And I think you're right. If they're going to continue doing things the Warrior way next year, how do we retool? I think he's an avenue towards doing that by trading him.
And I'll say this. It is the smart move to look at, but it's also, do it at your own peril because of what we were just talking about, and that's the fact that Jordan Poole as a stopgap that can score, and you can put the ball in his hands a lot. In all of these games where Steph is out, and Steph's already missed 20, and he's probably going to miss closer to 30 when it's all said and done, you have to be able to be good enough to survive without Steph. And even though this team top to bottom has not had the record that anybody wants, including themselves, they have been able to survive without Steph, which is kind of an oddity, again, in this whole landscape. Like, I would have thought, the Warriors are 32-18 in the games that, when they have Steph, and they've lost basically every game when they haven't had him, and that's why they have the record they have. Like, they're way over with him, they're way under, without him. Hasn't been the case. And so why has it not been the case? Well, I think I think in part it goes to the disconnect between when the Warriors have had all the veteran players. The young players have been less effective, but it also goes to the fact that Poole has been that stopgap type of scorer that you really need. And if you trade that away, do you become the kind of team that can't win any games when your franchise player is out, as has been the case in recent history?
I still think the one young player they wouldn't consider trading is Kuminga. I think they would consider trading Poole. Again, I think it depends on which direction they want to go in, but it's pretty apparent.
Re-engage on Anunoby, baby.
Yeah, they do not want to part ways with Jonathan Kuminga, who, by the way, had a nice game against Eclipse this week.
Let's go to John in San Francisco. Final two callers. John in San Francisco on 95.7 The Game.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, John?
Hello.
How you guys doing?
We're doing well, man. Make sure you got your radio
Hello?
down.
How you guys doing?
You know what, John? We got to let you go, John. John was going to ask about Hassan Whiteside.
No thanks.
Yeah,
thank you for calling, but Hassan
thank
Whiteside,
you for calling. There were
no
some radio
thanks.
issues.
Yeah.
Charlie in New York City. Final word.
Charlie.
What's going on, Charlie?
Hey, long time no speak, guys. You were sort of answering some of the things I was going to ask about going into next year. If you guys, I'll throw like three quick questions and I'll listen off the line. Do you think Draymond, I guess it depends on where they finish. I guess I'll premise with that question. But do you think Draymond, he has a player option, do you think he'll be back next year? You think, obviously, the timeline with the youngsters and the veterans haven't really worked out. You know, Moody is sort of questionable. Wiseman is obviously gone. If you had to predict a starting five for them next year, both you guys, what would you think? Do you think Draymond's back? Do you think they're, like you were mentioning, do they trade Poole? Wiggins, would they keep Wiggins, or do you think they're going to move him? Will Kuminga slide into the starting lineup? So I just wanted to get your sense of sort of the game plan for next year, and I'll keep listening, guys.
Good question. How everything ends matters for sure. If I had to pick a starting five for next year, I think it's Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, and Looney. I think it's the same five. To me, where they tinker is that next group of three or four players.
I would go. I think it's the beginning and the end for Draymond. I would go Wiggins, Clay, Looney, Poole, Steph.
Wait,
no
what?
Dre.
Wait, say it again.
So no Steph, no Draymond, no Draymond.
Wait, who was in?
Wiggins, Clay, Looney, Poole, and Steph.
Oh, Poole. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So three guards without Draymond.
Yeah. I know.
I think if I had to say right now, I think Jordan Poole's getting traded in the offseason. I think that'll be the move, and we'll see.
That would be my hope.
I think that would be the thought.
You think everything will work out with Draymond?
I think
he'll opt in. See, he could opt in, and they can still trade.
He
him.
might opt in. Yeah. I think if he opts in, he'll play it out. He also might opt out, and they try to do a deal. I think they're going to try to keep him. I mean, that's part of the part of the savings on Wiseman is hopefully you can redistribute that toward solidifying that. I think he's played well enough where you'd want to keep him.
Mm-hmm.
So. Good stuff, Whitey. Great 3 hours flying by.
Thank you.
For Cameron Williams, excellent work. I'm John Dickinson. We're back next week from 10 until 1, and enjoy the rest of the All-Star festivities. Keep it locked right here. Fox Sports Radio next, 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
It wasn't the internet, and it wasn't the warehouse club.
But?
It was video.